everywhere, da, da, da. It's like the same people that did all that are now doing this. The same people who colonized everything are also promoting all these ideas that white people are the colonists. So it's like you can't see that you're being played. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just to cause more division. That's all it's going to do. There's no, I mean, what is it that we want? We want, what is it that people believe? That if just black people, if basically black women ran everything in this world, it would all be peace and harmony. That is, but that's, if I said that publicly, people would be like, yes, yes. That they would be like, yes, that, yes, you're absolutely right. Oh, yes, you're so right.
Yes, daddy.
You know what I'm saying though, that's basically what Biden's doing. Like we need more black women and brown women and people of color, women of color, like, you know, and it's like, okay, so you put that person there. What's their principles? Why is it that just because you're a black person, you're a better human being? Isn't that exactly like what's being promoted right now? And I mean, in the past, or like, but in the past, white people, it seemed like white people were good and black people were bad. I'm like, okay, so the way we actually solve this is by just reversing it.
Mhm.
That's not going to change anything.
Yeah.
Oh, you're already recording. I didn't
Oh
realize.
shit, buddy.
Yeah. We were having a great conversation.
So, okay, but how does this play into? Okay, go ahead, Mitch. Yeah.
Is because we don't have a lot of time to just go through another cycle of like, oh, okay, now all the the black people are good and the white people are bad, or whatever. It's like while we're just bickering and going back and forth about race and things like that, meanwhile the Great Reset. I was watching some other video last night about World Economic Forum talking about how they're like, oh yeah, there's going to be something that's going to happen soon that's like way bigger than COVID. Talking about like some cyber pandemic. It's like, okay, this is the real stuff to focus on. I mean, we have to look at it all within context. But
Hey, Mitch, can we turn up your audio?
Do you have a microphone? Do you have your microphone?
no, how's this better? Is
No.
it better?
No.
What?
I think you might just have to bring it closer to you.
Oh no, I think what it
May not be set to hit,
Oh right, yeah. That's right.
It's on your internal microphone.
but
How was that?
Whoa.
yeah,
Oh,
no,
no.
turn it down slightly.
Bring it down.
Um,
a little bit.
What?
How is that? I'll be back.
Is it good?
I'll take it as it's on.
Do you like this?
No.
This is the cyber pandemic.
How does this make you feel?
Wait, hold on. Let me ask you a question, Mitch. Did they say cyber pandemic?
I think that was I'd have to go back through and listen.
It's funny because
I
when you
heard
said that
cyber attack.
word, I just took it for granted. Cyber pandemic. Yeah, of course that's a thing. Now I'm like, what the fuck does that mean?
You're just making up fucking words now.
Cyber pandemic.
Sounds pretty lit though. I want to be a part of it. I want to be part of history.
Well, think about that. Like, so like they got everyone to wear masks really quickly, shut down all that. Like, yes, just wear the mask, please. It'll be okay. Now it'll be like you can't even go on Facebook or like real, like, I don't know what cyber pandemic is, but imagine you went on Facebook and you see a bunch of people's accounts or something, and it's like maybe not even them. So you can't even trust what you're seeing online. Like, we already can't trust what we're seeing online, but now it's like the next wave of it. Like, what if that's the cyber pandemic?
Well, I have a guy who's trying to sell me some Forex shit on Facebook. And I
I
was
get
like,
that
"Oh,
every day.
yeah."
People trying to sell me Forex.
But he's posing as like a beautiful woman from London. I'm like, hey, let's FaceTime. He's like, no. No, too busy for that. But he'll respond to a message in like a second.
Hey Drake,
Yeah.
Drake, can you check your audio too? It sounds a little funny.
Up or down?
Oh, now it sounds good. It's just sounded muffled a little bit.
I don't know.
It sounds
Whatever.
fine.
You sound great now. You sound great. It's so funny that as you impersonated the person you were talking to, you got an accent on. You got a little accent. No.
Well, let's be honest, okay? We know.
I'm just pretending to be you, Asif.
Yeah, I know. Okay,
Bad
not for
Bunny.
anybody. Not for anybody.
Everybody is so focused on how they're feeling and trying to chase something that they can't even clearly define. Meanwhile, it's very simple to understand how you feel. It's like it's just based on stimulus. That's it, right? But it's all based on stimuli that you didn't direct, so you're not really clear on what they are. So you just have this kind of sum total of like, okay, I think when I do this, I feel good, and when I do that, I feel not good. So I'm just going to generally do this kind of thing, and then meanwhile, you're not paying attention at all to the people who are providing that stimulus, what they're actually doing with society.
Mm.
You know, and like this whole cyber pandemic is just going to be an excuse to lock everything down from a cyber perspective. You know what I mean? No more free discussion. And it'll be justified because if we don't have these controls and safeguards in place, then we won't, you know, have you got to put your mic down, Asif.
But yeah,
I can hear you anyways, but
it's can you hear me right now?
yeah, now we can.
Okay.
I still want you to hold that mic.
It's going to be like, we need more security online. We need more measures in place to make sure we're protecting you guys. It's for your safety. It's for everyone's safety.
Right. It's
'Cause,
always
you know-
protecting old people, protecting children. But then if I say, look, the best way to raise a child is a man and a woman who are biologically the parents and so forth, they're like, oh, you can't say that. And it's like, that's those people's choice and their freedom and their free expression. And it's like, but I'm talking about what's actually best for children. And you're saying you want to protect children. You're saying you want to protect these people.
That's like the school board would say, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, all kids are educated equally, you know, or get a good education. So we should have every kid should be able to read. No. That's just, you know,
That's white supremacy.
that's white supremacy. Yeah. You're ignoring their culture. Okay. Their culture is that they can't read. Okay.
That's so obviously retarded.
Right.
Oh man.
But like,
this-
it's denying the fundamental starting point of where the challenge or where the problem or where the thing originates from that is causing like, oh, this is what we're trying to prevent. And it can be prevented by actually ensuring here in the beginning that they get a good starting point. It's like when you put a stick with a new plant and you tie it to that stick, right? And you're just making sure that it's going to grow up. He's like, oh, you can't tie a stick to a plant. That is abusive. That's like, oh, you got to let the plant just grow on its own. Let it do its own things. Like, or you could ensure that it grows properly and actually does really well, you know?
You know, it also doesn't make sense is because if you look at the whole discussion around race and all these points, it's like, okay, first of all, you get your culture and your language and your thought processes and all that from your parents and from the environment you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So you also get genetic information from them, and that's going to have an influence.
Mm-hmm.
But genetic information isn't going to determine the language you speak,
Right.
or the accent you have.
Right.
Okay. So, or whether you can do math or not, or whether you can read. The genetic information alone isn't going to determine that. Because if you take a child who has like Bill Gates as their parents, and you take that child and you just put them out in nature, like they're never even going to learn how to walk. You know what I mean? They're not even going to learn anything. So it can't be just the genetics. There's the cultural aspect. And so what I see a lot of times, like that video we were watching earlier about what exactly are white people superior at, or whatever the title of it was, it's like, there's this argument in this whole theory that it's like, you can't discriminate against someone or hold them accountable for something that they can't physically control, that's like inherent to them, like genetically, for example. Like, in other words, I think the base argument is that racism is so evil because you're discriminating against someone based on their skin color, which they cannot change. Right.
Right.
But if I said, and I'm not justifying any of this, because ultimately all of this stems from the fact that we're in a hyper competitive system where there's no starting point of giving a fuck about anybody, really. No one cares about anybody. No lives matter. Okay. So from that perspective, I'm not justifying, I'm just like breaking it down. But if I said, look, okay, this black person comes into a job interview, let's say, and there's the white person, and the white person speaks in a certain way, and the black person speaks in a different way, and they gave the white person the job because they spoke more professionally or whatever. You would say, okay, but why would that be? And I'm saying it's not because the person was white or black, it's because of the way they spoke. But they would still say that's racism. Why? Because in the black culture, they speak a certain way. So now you're discriminating against them based on their culture. Like, okay, sure. You're discriminating. Why is discriminating against culture bad? Why is that evil? Do you see what I'm saying? It's not, because now we're not talking about something that's inherent to something you cannot change.
Right.
That's the thing. You're differentiating between what you can change and what you can't change.
You see how it's like this kind of like quick little leap, and then it's like,
Yeah.
no,
you're
but
right.
they're black. They speak like that because they're black. It's like,
Obama doesn't speak like that.
right,
Drake doesn't speak like that.
a person. But so let's say you're black.
Yeah,
and
but then they call you white,
Right, exactly.
speaking like a white person.
Yeah.
But that's
true.
culture.
Hmm.
And how does everyone speaking like that mean there's no more black people?
Right.
How does it change the fact there's no more people with black, like black? You know what I'm saying? Dark skin. How would that change that if everybody spoke like that? And I'm not saying everyone should speak like that, but in the terms of the competitive system, that's the argument as to why they didn't get the job, right?
You're trying to erase my culture.
Right. So it's like, but what's evil about that?
Like what about satanic culture? Is it okay to erase that?
Yeah, but they're actually evil. They're actually doing something bad.
You're going to erase people's culture. And that's the starting point within all of this, is that nobody can change. Right. That's why it's like, hey, like we should educate, right? Or it doesn't make sense that anybody in this world should not be able to read. Yeah, but that's not this culture. It's like, okay, change the fucking culture.
See, but there's so much momentum or inertia in that where it's
Mhm.
like, well, that's not possible.
Right. Right.
So how is that going to be possible that you could actually change that? So then we just have to deal with the way things are. But then the problem with that, though, is if you look at the narrative that's happening right now, the narrative is that, quote, white people should change themselves and their culture because it's making society less inclusive for people who aren't white. Or straight people should change their attitudes and culture and so forth because it's not inclusive for people who are trans or not straight or whatever the thing is. So there's this sort of, it's like actually this belief that people who are white, straight, male are actually already perfect, and that therefore they are superhuman and they can do anything.
Right.
They can just change themselves or do whatever and be more accepting and loving, but nobody else can do that.
Mhm.
It's like this, you have to actually implicitly accept that there is some kind of superiority. But the reality is, how is the superiority actually measured? Because it's not measured on an individual basis. That's why the discussion has switched to systemic racism.
Who feels less bad?
Well, but what I mean is, what is the determining factor always in terms of how the proof
Money.
is that? What's that?
Money.
Money. It's always about that. Right. And then going to jail would be like the flip side of that, right? Because like black people are in prison at higher rates, apparently, and all this stuff, right? So it's like having no freedom, which is the same thing as having lots of money, is freedom, right? So having no freedom, no money versus having lots of money, having freedom to do whatever you want. That's the determining factor. And so if we had a world where everybody had everything they needed, why would that ever be in any influence whatsoever? Who is it that fears that the most?
The people with all the money.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
very top.
it's not, quote, white people, and it's not black people, and it's not anything other than the minority who have ultimate power and control in this world. And think about this, with everything going on, the system is starting to not work, right? So those who are in the position where all of their assets, everything is like the system itself, and that's the only way they have control and they have the lifestyles they have, is by maintaining control and having everybody basically do a certain thing in society, like everybody else, I mean, right? So as that starts to shift, they're having to now reset it, because how do they maintain control over everybody? It's like you have to be able to predict what everyone's going to do. You see what I'm trying to say? Like, meaning if you're a business, if you're a restaurant and you literally cannot predict when you're going to have customers, you're fucked. You know what I mean? Like, you have to be able to predict, okay, we're going to have a lunch rush hour, so I need to have more staff in. And for 3 months of the year, I'm going to have very few customers. But then right around Thanksgiving, we're going to make all this money. It's like, all that's going to happen. It's like it might take you time to figure out the patterns, but It's like you're predictable what's going to happen so you can figure out the money thing. So right now, it's like everyone is experiencing this total instability within themselves.
Mhm.
Right? They don't even know what gender they are. They don't know what fucking race they are. They don't know anything. All they know is they're not happy. They have no purpose whatsoever. And that's the key, is like no one has any real purpose.
Mm.
So people's purpose becomes fighting racism or fighting for women's rights or whatever the thing is. But that's not a real purpose. Okay. It's a directed purpose. But if no one has any real purpose and everyone is unstable within themselves, how do you, if you're sitting in the position of you're basically making money from everybody being predictable, how do you make sure that that doesn't fuck with what you have? It's like you have to figure out a way to control everyone even more.
So I want to talk about 2 points. You were talking about linking this with how you were saying, I was saying, so change the culture if it's outputting something bad, but you were making the point of, you see how there's so much inertia or forward movement into this idea already, that it's like culture is the way it is. That's why. This is why the only answer is what we're talking about. The concept of forgiveness is to let go of all the things that we've been holding on to as an individual, as a group, as a society, as humanity, as a globe, whatever. The point to realize is, so long as we're still holding on, and this is for everyone's individual process who's listening to this, so long as you're holding on to, but I've made these decisions and I've already done these things, I'm already experiencing the consequences of this stuff. And if it was that easy to change it, then I would have changed it a long time ago. So I can't accept the cognitive dissonance of, I could have changed this a long time ago, but I didn't. Right. So because of that, you hold on to it. But we're saying, if you go through this process that we're suggesting with DIP Lite, using Technotutor and DIP Pro, and studying the Destiny material and all that, you can let go of that and realize you can change right now and things will get better. And that's what has to expand culturally, et cetera, et cetera. So the concept of forgiveness is what is necessary to change this world, you as an individual. Exactly. Self-forgiveness.
But people are attached to those things and they don't want to change because it defines who they are. They say, I am the way I am because of the things that I've been through, and I want to hold on to it, and I'm attached to it because it makes me who I am, and I'm stronger because of it.
It's a lack of vocabulary, though. It's so in other words, for ourselves, we have to not be reactive to it. When somebody wants to hold on to something, because what does that tell you? Is that person doesn't want to change because they don't think that it's possible. And even if you try to convince them it's possible, you can't convince them it's possible. It'd be like trying to convince me I can bake a cake like Gordon Ramsay or something, and I don't even know how to like what flour is or anything. You see what I'm saying? So it's like that's not possible. But if you took me step by step through the process of learning, the basics of everything that's required, and then you told me, hey, you can bake a cake like Gordon Ramsay. I'm like, what? How would I do that? And you'd be like, oh yeah, you just do this, this, and this. I'd be like, oh, okay, that's how he's doing that. I see. Okay, I can do that. And so right now as a society, everything in terms of solutions is like, I mean, let's just look at it. What are the solutions being presented right now?
Great reset.
Great reset.
So,
right?
so here's the point I wanted to focus on. That's why I use the term forgiveness instead of self-forgiveness, is that this idea that supporting people to let go of the things that are holding them back is actually what they're using to implement the Great Reset.
Sure, yeah.
And it's coming in the exact form that Cameron said is the biggest problem, or the way you measure inequality with money. What they're doing is saying, we'll forgive your debts. In exchange for that, you give us control. Which means, I don't know if you guys saw that document of like the apparent leaked Canada game plan of what's going to happen quarter by quarter. There's going to be COVID-21 in about Q1 or Q2 of 2021. So I don't know the validity of all this, but it's an interesting idea because they're talking about that point of, we'll wipe away all your debts if you say you sign the document saying you're not going to own stuff anymore. Like, we'll
See,
manage
what's required for that is everyone has to feel like they're guilty. Do you know what I mean? Like, not just be guilty, like you have a lot of debt, because some people have a lot of debt, but it's like, like you said, I can't change. So if you look at, for example, the two sides, which is like the white people, and they have all this privilege, right? And then you have the black people, people of color, and they're all screwed over, right? They can never, ever get to a point of equality from their perspective until the people over here recognize that, embrace them, stop being so evil.
Mhm.
But the people over here right now are starting to internalize being inherently guilty for being white. So it's like bringing everyone to society to a point where you're like, I am so fucked. There's nothing I can do. I'm totally fucked.
Mhm.
Please, someone forgive me. You know, and here comes, and so everyone is now a victim. Everyone is an oppressor. And by being an oppressor, you're also oppressed. You know what I'm saying? Even if you're an oppressor and you have all this privilege as an oppressor, you're still oppressed by that because the majority is now oppressing you for being an oppressor. So now everyone's like, well, fuck, I need a savior.
And
It-
and this is talked about. If anybody listening to this is reading the blogs, like Creation's Journey to Life, Heaven's Journey to Life, it talks about how your energy, but another examples of energy is like your emotions and feelings inside is represented externally with money. And what that looks like is you convince everybody that they feel like shit, they have to feel like shit, and it's not their fault that they feel like shit. So that way they say, oh, it's not my fault I feel like shit, it's the system's fault or these people's fault. So if we change that, then you'll feel better. Equal to, you're in debt, you're in massive amounts of debt. It's not because of your fault, it's just the way the system is. You have to be in debt, but we'll erase that. We'll change that for you. The system will change that for you. And what I see, what you're saying within that specifically is like, people have to feel like we're talking about this, about the average millennial. They have a bunch of student debt and they don't own property. So if the negotiation is, hey, you can't own property, but we'll wipe away all your debt, it's like, sweet, I'm not even paying anything for that because I already don't own property. So yeah, fucking wipe away all my debt, I'll sign that. And the point within the more cultural, or sorry, not the cultural point, but the Great Reset is, yeah, that means that by, you know, the whole 2030 thing, I have no privacy, I own nothing, and I'm happy. It's like, that's what's being ushered in through the debt forgiveness, or we'll make you feel better. You'll feel better. It's internal and external. And the key point that Cameron was making about how if things aren't predictable, it's hard to control things. So you want to make things predictable so that you can control it. That's what the education system's for. But there's a difference between hardware control and software control. We are all proving that you can change your software. People believe you can't change the culture, you can't change your beliefs, you can't change your ideas. That's what everybody believes. It's obviously bullshit. Like, we've all individually proven that, right? And so we know that you can change software, but what they're focused on is like, oh shit, the software thing, it's not working. Like, now we don't have direct control over people's education. So that's why certain countries are outlawing homeschooling. You have to come back into the school. They need to get you back into the schools, but that's just software. They know that that's not secure. They know that just controlling your thinking, it is something that with the right tools or whatever the case may be, you can break out of it. So what they're trying to do is control the hardware, control the physical things that you have access to, the structural things that you have access to. That's why you're seeing it's like they're trying to wipe out the pathway to get freedom. They're trying to wipe out the pathway.
Yeah.
They've already wiped out people's individual ability to do so, but they're trying to wipe out the pathway so that
Mhm.
nobody can even try. And the other part of that is they're also trying to change the food that you eat, right? You guys saw that in the Great Reset, is like, meat is just a luxury. You don't need meat anymore. Like, in the future, it's like, it's just going to be something that you have every once in a while. It's like, what? The Great Reset of all this stuff, coronavirus and racism, you're going to wipe out meat? There's something structural there, right? And the same thing with not being able to own anything. It's like, even if you tried, even if you change yourself to have the programming and self-will principle to really push yourself, it's like they're trying to make sure that no matter what, you can't do that. Jesse, you want to say something?
Yeah, so one of those pathways that they've eliminated is within like your self-awareness point of even knowing your own hardware and knowing your own software. And one way that they did that was Western medicine. I mean, it's very evident
Right.
how many people identify with Western medicine. And they say, why wouldn't they have figured it out if there was another way? They would have told us. Like they totally identify with it and they defend it. They say that there is no other way. They would have told us because why would we be suffering? They wouldn't let us keep suffering if they knew a different way.
It's
But
this
They've
lack of
eliminated that
realization.
pathway like you talked about.
Yeah, it's so well said, because that's the realization. Is like the starting assumption for some reason. Well, we know why. It's because you're getting programmed to just listen to authority. But it's like, for some reason, we're
Yeah.
assuming that the media and Twitter and
Yeah.
doctors like have your best interest in mind. Like they're just thinking about how I can make sure that you're healthy and you're happy. So
Yeah,
that's such a
but
good point.
emphasize that. We haven't really talked about that yet.
And that this is why
Doctors
Cameron.
have the best in mind for you. Of course you would think that. Of course you would. And people are like, well, doctors, why would they get into the profession if they don't want to help you? That doesn't make sense. Yeah, there may be a couple corrupt doctors, but overall, doctors really are there to help you.
Yeah, but
That's what they would
police,
say.
they're all racist, and the whole system is racist. And no matter, even if they're a good cop, all they can do is be racist and try to kill everybody.
But all the peaceful the protests are peaceful. There's only a couple bad apples that are doing the rioting, but all the protests are peaceful. But there's not just a couple bad apples for police officers. They're all bad. Jessica, what you're addressing is that point of, we're not saying that doctors as people are any more evil than other people.
They're all as evil as everybody. Yeah.
Exactly. And the point of that is what Cameron was talking about, is like, I don't remember if this was before we started recording or now, or while we were recording, but we live in a hyper competitive society where the underlying starting point of everything we do is profit.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily to fuck people over. It's not necessarily to make sure you have good health, but it's profit. And the way you get profit is, well, how could I sell you something that you already have?
Mm.
You can't, right? Notice how all marketing is all about feeling good, right? All marketing is, if you get this, you'll feel good. But how could I sell you feeling good if you already feel good?
Right.
Mm.
So what do you have to program society to feel?
Shit.
Bad.
That laugh. but isn't that like such a simple way of looking at it?
Yeah.
And if you actually, whoever's listening to this, if you take that in and then just watch advertising, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. They're creating this. Media is no different from advertising. It's just, you just can't really tell what the product is. For if someone's selling a massager, right? Massage gun. I'm looking at Jessica and she has this really awesome massage gun. It's so good. It's so good. I'm gonna order one. But if you're selling a massager, it's like, if I'm making a video about selling a massager and it's 15 seconds because it's a Facebook ad, right? It's like, I'm going to show somebody with red pain, like red flashing, like, you ever get pain right here, bro? And then great music, and then a gun, and then this massager, and boom, you feel blue, right? Until you get, yeah, you're right. It turns blue, nice cooling sensation, and then you feel better. Problem that you didn't know you fucking had. And then you feel like, oh shit, the solution, right? Isn't that what like the whole like police brutality thing is? A problem that you didn't know was really, or sorry, people have been being programmed with that idea for so long. And it was all inside of you, all of us, right? So that when they said, hey, remember black people get oppressed by the police? It's like, it activates inside of all of us. And this is what we were talking about another podcast. It's like the real life application of sleeper agents. You say the sequence of words and it's like, right, yes. Nazi, Hitler, Trump is Hitler. Nazis are the ones that are the Jews, apparently. Ben Shapiro is a Jew, but he's still a Nazi. It's like, nothing makes sense anymore because that program is activated. So you're just there to like get people, right?
And that again, it's in a lot of different areas in society, yes. But right now, that stream, the medical field is just streaming in my threads everywhere right now. And so that's evident with like medication. When you see people who are like, well, how could somebody who, you know, has blood pressure issues not take that medication right now? Well, okay, I understand in certain situations, like the person possibly needs something or else they'll die in that moment. I get it. But you're not looking at generationally what has the parents accepted and allowed that has continued this genetic thing to be passed down to this person being born and having an issue, or them not even looking at why am I experiencing this from a fundamental structural level? Like, what am I accepting and allowing in my life? Whereas people are not willing to look at those things. And, you know, at the very bare minimum, like, take complete responsibility of the food you're eating, take complete responsibility of physically the movement that you're doing, like, and take complete responsibility of becoming aware of your body, like at the very least. And then you can look at the programming that you've been exposed to and the generational abuse and trauma that's in your family. And when you can take a look at all of that and take responsibility of all of that, then I without a doubt am going to say that you can eliminate that from your life. But the problem is people are not aware that they can even do that. Society has told you that the only thing you can do is do what the doctor tells you to do about that issue. There's no other way to solve it. There's nothing else you need to look at. There's nothing else you need to take responsibility for. You can keep living your life the way that you are and just take this medication and it'll solve it for you. And it's so much easier than doing anything else.
Well, that shows why the education system was put into place. Is because they can control what you understand about things. And what does it teach you at an inherent level is like, there's people way smarter than you. Remember those kids who got the A's and all that stuff?
Yeah.
What they're doing. But they learned the same shit. So if you actually go and analyze what did they learn, they don't know anything. But then also, what does a person have to be able to process to know, okay, if I do all these things like you're saying, then that could change. Plus the environment would have to change and so many things would have to change. But what's the biggest market for all these medications? If you think about it, it's the boomer generation, right? Which I'm nothing against any particular generation. That's just what we call it. But it's the generation that trusted the system 100% implicitly. They're like, we'll do whatever you say. You just give us that 401k. Like,
That's well
take care
said.
of us later, right? We'll put all of our money, we'll trust the stock market, all this stuff, just take care of us later, right? But then while they were chasing their happiness and their security and their freedom and all these things, everything was happening in the background to figure out exactly what we're seeing now, how to put all this in place and to use and think about it, because you're so busy. You just got to go to work every day. You don't care about why do I have high blood pressure? It doesn't matter. I trust the system. I trust the doctor. Okay. Whatever you tell me to do, I'll do it. Oh, it's causing another problem. Okay. Well, you have any other medications? Okay. I'll take that one. Like whatever. It doesn't matter, you know? And then you went to college and you got a good job. So, hey, that'll work for my kids. So you spend all your focus just telling them you got to go to college. You got to get a good job. You didn't even look ahead 20 years and say, why would there be any fucking jobs when they create AI?
That's so interesting because it on every level takes away responsibility from everyone. So like when you watch the pharmaceutical commercials, they say, you know, ask your doctor if this is right for you, right? And then you go to the doctor and the doctor is of course going to prescribe it because they're going to get money from the pharmaceutical, but then the doctor doesn't actually have to take responsibility for what happens to you for you taking that drug. It's like, oh, well, I'm not going to be held responsible. The drug company is not going to be responsible because they're like, well, the doctor prescribed it. So he obviously thought that it was good for you. It's just like everyone can let go of responsibility and it's just whatever happens, happens, right? And that's really the society that we're living in. And that's not just in the medical field. It's, as Cameron's saying, in the educational industry or in the educational field as well, where, you know, the parents are thinking the teachers are going to say, you know, what the kid needs to learn. They're going to tell me. And then the teachers are like, well, your kid comes to class and they're already done. There's not really much I can do with them. I just go through the curriculum. So it's not really my fault, you know, and then the kid graduates and then they're thrust into society, or they go to college, and in college it's like, oh, I paid for this education, whatever. And the college is like, we're not going to guarantee that you get a job anyway. We're just taking your money. So it's over and over and over again, no one taking responsibility for where they're at or what they're accepting or allowing, or what even where they're heading to, right? As far as like where our society is heading to, where their children are heading to, where their own health is heading to. No one is taking responsibility. And that is really what I see as the integral part within each of these things, which is within each of these subjects that we've brought up, right? Is that everyone's just like, fuck it.
Well, that's what's so important about what we're all about with Self-Perfected, is getting each individual to ask that question to themselves of, how am I responsible for this, for what's here? And you look at, like, I mean, anything as simple as, like, let's say you have kids or like a relationship or whatever, right? You can ask, well, what's my responsibility in this? And then to look at, well, what if I'm 100% responsible for this? Like, what would that require of me? But also, kind of like Cameron was saying, it's like, if you have low vocabulary, you can't even process that or even think of any sort of solution. So that's why it's so important to take that responsibility for yourself, because the school system fucked you over. If you went to higher education, that fucked you over even more. And so it's on us to actually be willing enough to investigate, well, what does a real education look like? Because I'm someone who went to public school and then went to private university, got my degree, everything, and I went out into the world and I didn't know how to do shit. I didn't even know what responsibility was. Responsibility was some word that I had that reminded me of, like, when I had work, like a job, or like some shit I had to do. And I was like, ugh, I don't want to do that. But now I realize how things work. So Drake, you're saying no one takes responsibility. Well, we are. You're right. The vast majority of people aren't, but we are. And then there's also the people at the very top that realize the more responsibility that I can take on, the more wealth I have, the more power and control that I can have. And so the difference is, though, it's like responsibility is your ticket, in a sense, to rise up in the world. But then the real question is, well, what's your starting point within the responsibility? Because if your starting point is, I just will accumulate responsibility, and yeah, I'll take that promotion, and oh yeah, I can be making, 300K next year, and I'm working for some pharmaceutical company or whatever. It's like, okay, your starting point is more responsibility. Well, your starting point is still just self-interest and profit, instead of looking at it where we're coming from, which is, let's look at this world. Let's look at the fact, like Cam just said, and we talk about, AI is coming for everyone's fucking job. There's gonna be a lot of unemployed people in the next 5 to 10 years, probably even faster than that. It's gonna be a lot of people knocking on your door, seeing if you got anything for them. And so it's on us to take responsibility now, not just, okay, that's like a good idea, but it's like right here, right now. And then what that practically looks like is taking responsibility to start interacting with people that are in this community. Because if you're thinking you're taking responsibility, but you're just listening to the podcast or just part of the Facebook group or whatever, if you're not actually taking responsibility to have those conversations, support people, hold yourself accountable, hold other people accountable, you're not doing shit and you're just deluding yourself. But for those people, like in the Self-Perfected group, there are a lot of people now, especially over the past couple of months, that have really taken on their responsibility. They do the video challenges. They're reaching out to people. They've got more involved within TechnoTutor. They're doing DIP Lite. They're actually writing substantial amounts in their assignments. Those are the kind of people that now have taken this on for themselves. And then you get to see how that ripples out. And that is the way forward that I see through this great reset and all this bullshit that's happening. Is you take on more responsibility and ask yourself, like, for all those people who are talking shit and complaining about politicians or the elite or whoever's in power or the systemic racism, are you willing to get to the highest level in the system possible to guarantee that it can actually create an outcome that's best? Because if you're not, then why the fuck are you complaining?
But I think the very first layer of that is obviously responsibility for your life. But if you have children, or you're planning on having children, understand the magnitude of responsibility that you have to take on to raise a child to be an effective human being. Because so many people are not even aware how malleable a child is at such a young age, and how they're unaware of themselves and why they're doing what they're doing, and how they're imprinting on that child everything that they're doing when that child is young. They don't care. They don't think about the consequences of having a child when they don't even know how to care for themselves. They don't care that I have all these internal issues, I have all these medical issues, I have all this instability emotionally, but if I have a child, then I'll have to be responsible for them, and I can just focus on them, and I won't have to focus on any of my issues, so it'll be fine. That child is getting all of that downloaded into them. That child will have the same issues you have. People are completely selfish with that decision of having children. They think, I'm going to feel loved, something is going to need me, and I'm going to be able to always have someone to take care of me when I get old. And it's just what my parents did. It's what my grandparents did. It's what the people around me are doing. All the other people in my class have kids already. It's just what people do at my age. And it's my decision and it's my body. So I get to do it. And it's all self-orientated. It's not at all considering the child. It's not considering if you have the capability of giving them the best life possible, of raising them to be the most effective human being, of not passing on generational trauma and abuse. I mean, like, that is never considered. And it's just fascinating to me how selfish people are, how closed off they are from the rest of the world around them, how they just make decisions based off, this is what's going to feel good for me. And that's all that matters. And within my lifetime, I'm only going to do what feels good for me. I'm not going to consider the world. I'm not going to consider how it affects society. I'm not going to consider how it affects my children. So that's why I see all of these patterns happening right now, is because people cannot look outside themselves. They can't process anything that's going on outside of, does it make me feel good? Do I think it's, being considerate for everyone else's feelings? Everything is feeling orientated. It's not based on effectiveness. And if we could all move past that alone would heavily impact the world in a great way. But we can't. It seems like we just can't get past this feeling good. We always have to feel good right now. And it's just, it's mind-boggling. It's crazy.
Where do you guys think that feeling good comes from, actually? Like real feeling good?
Like actually feeling good. Not like the fleeting moment feeling good.
From taking responsibility.
and being stable and having your needs met.
From actually building something.
Yeah, and I would say
Pur-
like even
purpose.
Yeah.
the
Purpose.
more
Without purpose, I'd be fucking miserable.
the more attractive way, because obviously the way Mitch made a really good point of when people hear responsibility, what we would think of is exactly what Mitchell thinks of. It's like why is taking responsibility is not sexy, right? But doesn't it just make sense? It comes from what you do.
It's not sexy yet, Asif.
It's not sexy yet.
It
Exactly.
may be sexy to some people though.
Exactly, right? But the
Yeah.
point is this is why developing our communication ability is so important. Cameron made this point on the last call that we were a part of before this. He's like, does happiness really come from when you're just sitting watching Netflix by yourself?
Fuck no.
Like, think of that happiness, and you can enjoy a TV show. It's not an issue, right? But it's like, compare that to when you're like talking to like good friends of yours and you guys are united in a common purpose and you guys want to support each other. Now imagine you expanded that out to your family, to your community, right? It's like we have this like far reaching, we're all over the place, all over North America. But it's like, imagine we could have this with our neighbors. And they weren't afraid to come over to our house and all that and see each other in the streets and like hug each other and all that stuff. Cameron was making this point, and I guess it's like kind of what Jessica was touching on. She's like, man, it fascinates me about how we're all just like, right? But the point that Cameron was making about baking a cake, if someone told Cameron that, theoretically, if you didn't even know what flour was, and someone was like, you can make a cake, like you make this amazing cake, like no one can do that. Maybe Gordon Ramsay. You can convince them that it's possible, but not possible for them, right? They'll be like, oh, maybe that person can do it, no problem.
Yeah.
This is why he was saying you have to walk people through a step by step.
Mhm.
And that's why it's so important for us to develop our communication ability. Because doesn't it make sense that everybody just being self-interested, self-centered, and not being able to consider what's going on in the world, doesn't that set the stage so perfectly? Nobody wants to take responsibility for their health and their feeling. All that. Doesn't that set the stage so perfectly for somebody else to do it, for the Great Reset? It's like, cool, we'll manage that stuff for you. Don't worry about it. We'll make sure it's taken care of. No problem.
Yeah.
And we have the best technology to ensure that, right? Don't you want to be surveyed? Don't you want to have surveillance equipment to make sure that we can scan your retinas or just put something in you that can just tell you when you shouldn't eat something for your body? So that way you don't have to think about it. You don't have to do all the work necessary to figure out what would be best for yourself.
We'll do all the work for you.
Right, exactly.
But we'll also put a self-destruct inside of there that we have
Whoa,
control,
whoa, 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 whoa.
and we
whoa.
can kill you whenever we want.
You have to whisper that stuff. No, I don't know about that's pretty intense. But it's like the little we made that whole that was intense. She's trying to get us deplatformed. But Cameron's like, it's not intense, dude. That's remember we made that podcast, The Devil's in the Details. They
Yeah.
whisper that part. They whisper it,
Mm.
right? They say, guys, like, look at all this, right? And then just say, okay, cool, just sign this or just agree to this.
Hold on just a moment, okay? Is the starting point of the human seeking energy going to change?
Mm-mm.
Okay. So what happens when everything's totally controlled?
They can have unlimited access to stimulating you, so you never want to leave that stimuli.
When less people are able to access any kind of real purpose, what is going to happen to the human being?
I mean,
Oh.
wither
Yes.
away.
Like, have you ever just spent like 3 days watching Netflix all day?
Oh.
Yeah.
Just messing
Like,
around.
you just
doing
like feel like
nothing.
shit afterwards?
Gosh.
Okay.
Ugh.
Eventually you're going to get tired of that.
Ugh.
Yeah, people will
Okay.
probably get tired of it.
Well, here's what I'm telling you to say.
I
People are
sure
going to
hope
go
people do.
insane.
Yeah,
So the only way that you can make a total control surveillance system work is if you can essentially do what Jess was joking about. Like, you have to follow certain parameters, and if you don't follow those parameters, we just take you out of the system. So this idea that it's going to be like all heaven on earth if you just give up all your rights and let the elite just give everybody what they need, it's interesting because isn't it kind of what we've been saying this whole time? We want to create a world that's best for everybody. We want to give everybody what they need.
Yeah,
But what
point
we're
of
suggesting is
responsibility.
but what I'm suggesting is unconditionally,
Mm.
not only if you wear a mask and stay in your home.
You know what's funny is when you say we want a world that's best for all, everyone's like, fuck you. How can you determine
Wait,
what's
you
best
can
for
never do
all?
this. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but then when Klaus says it, it's like, yeah, this guy gets it.
Well, and
Crazy.
it
This guy's got like this German accent and everything. You're like, the guy sounds like a fucking villain, and you're
He's
like,
a Bond villain.
great.
Look at
it
him.
looks like a fucking.
and so
It's because it's programmed.
Scott.
Like, it's a movie. Everyone is programmed to just do what the evil villain says. You see what I'm saying? It's like we're all just wanting this movie to play out of like, oh, this guy's literally the fucking villain promising us the stars and the moon, and he's really just wanting to kill everybody. It's like, but people are just living out a movie that they've seen. That's why you've seen all these movies. It's just playing out because they're not taking any self-responsibility. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
It just requires people to take some self-responsibility within themselves of like, what am I doing and why am I doing it? Let me question that for a moment. Why am I giving my children to a system to educate them to be stupid? Show me one person that's come out of the education system making them smarter. You know, and Mitch, I think it was Mitch brought up this point, or somebody brought the point about like people going and having careers and all this stuff. And it's like, oh no, there's a point. One of you said something about going and getting the promotion, right? People think that you go into a job and you work hard and you get promoted, right? You don't get promoted based on your own effort any more than you do get an A in school based on your own effort. Do you know who gets the A's in school? The people who had parents who had high vocabularies when they were 4 years old. Just do the research. You can predict how well you're going to do in school based on your vocabulary when you're 4, which is based on your parents' income. So you don't go to school because finish out and do well because you learned something. How many people did well in school because you actually learned something? Versus how many people did well just because they knew how to play the game? So do you learn anything in college actually? Do you
Nope.
learn anything in
How to
medical
party.
school, actually? Like, do they train you to think like a scientist in medical school? No. So when
No.
they say trust the experts, trust the doctors don't think like scientists. They think like salespeople. Oh yeah. That's it. Like they think, and I'm not mean that in a negative way, although it is.
Say it again.
What? What did you say?
I said, say it again. The doctors don't think like scientists. They
Yeah.
think like salespeople.
But they
You
have
really
to.
think about that.
They have to because they don't understand what they're doing.
Also, they're in like a shit ton of debt, and so they got to make their money.
Man, yeah.
I would
But you-
say, and see, here's the thing. I'm not saying they're stupid. What I'm saying is they know how to take the information in the field of vocabulary they've been given and apply it within that. But who designed the curriculum? Like, does anyone ever wonder, like, who actually designed the curriculum? And why is it always going towards the point of selling more drugs and providing more surgeries? And it's never like what, they don't know how to eat properly to prevent health problems?
No,
Like, they don't know how.
that's not relative.
But you see what I'm saying? You can't sell that. It doesn't fit into the system of, like, if you're looking at a capitalist system, it's always about constant growth, right? So how can you have a system where everything is stable and you don't need any more growth? If that's the starting point, is always constant growth. So how can you have a health system based on teaching everybody how to eat effectively, exercise effectively think, and so forth, so you're not creating problems inside of your body and so forth? How can you have a system that is based on constant growth and also do that? You see what I mean? How can you have a system where the education based on constant growth, where the education system is everyone has an equally effective vocabulary?
The only way is if somehow the country was getting paid to have effective, healthy people who knew how to do it for themselves and take responsibility. But that's not possible.
But do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And think about this. If everyone was equally effective vocabulary wise, when would you need a doctor?
If your leg got cut off and they need to sew it back on.
Yeah, something
Right,
like
like in a special sense where it's like, okay, you need this physical skill that takes a lot of time to develop. But if every child was equally effective within understanding chemistry, and not just chemistry, but all the things within anatomy and everything, like you spent their first 18 years learning all that stuff to an equally effective level, why would you really need? I'm not saying you couldn't have any doctors at all, but you would need far less, wouldn't you?
Yeah, because people go to the doctor all the time. Oh, I've got a stuffy nose for longer than 3 days. I need to go to the doctor. Oh, I puked. I need to go to the doctor. Oh, I'm running a fever. I need to go to the doctor. Guess what? That's your body's natural response to something not being in homeostasis. And it's trying to fix itself and reset itself. But you're not even aware of that. You just see it as something that you don't enjoy experiencing. So you want to get rid of it. So you go to the doctor to have
Back to
them
feeling good, right?
give you something to suppress your body's natural response to something going on. They don't
Exactly.
even understand that.
So the system isn't based on everybody being equally effective, because that would create balance. And that's really the difference. Is right now, it's like what we're suggesting is balance. Why not have everybody live like a millionaire? Like what we would consider the quality of life of a millionaire, which most people dream about and the billionaires look down upon. Because it doesn't mean that you don't have a nice life as a millionaire. But what do you not have? Control over everyone else. What does a billionaire have?
Control
Yeah,
over
control.
everyone else.
Like that's what we consider when we think about a billionaire like Jeff Bezos. I mean, they have lots of control. Why does anyone need that kind of control over anyone?
They
Why
don't.
can't everyone have a really great life? And
Well,
so
it-
look at the Great Reset and all this stuff. Are they saying everyone needs to live like a millionaire? Is that what they're saying?
no,
Fuck
I
no.
don't hear them saying that at all.
no.
Yeah.
All they're saying is we're going to make sure that you don't get sick and that, No one can take anything from you or whatever it is. Like, really, I mean, what's the benefit that they're promoting right now? We just won't have terrorist attacks and we won't have anyone ever getting sick. Like, that's your fucking idea of utopia? I mean, so the only way to manage that is to literally create everybody like they're controlled robotic slaves that don't have any choice whatsoever. And that's why I was saying the problem with this is it can't work. It can't work because the human needs purpose. People will go crazy. You see what I mean? They will go nuts because they won't have any way to actually express that point. No one's, even if self-expression was wearing dresses and all this fun stuff that Forbes magazine is saying it is, or whoever's saying it, Vogue or whatever, how many people actually do that in their own lives versus just watch other people do it?
Mm-hmm.
But what is giving these people an artificial sense of purpose? It's like going to their job every day, going to school, trying to get something. But when you take away any possibility of ever moving up at all, then people, why would people ever want to? You see what I'm saying? Like, why would you even want to go to school? Like, you can't advance. So it's like and I'm not saying we need to have a point ultimately where everyone's always trying to move to some higher position, but that's only because everyone is not educated from the very beginning to understand really the principle of what's best for everybody. And so we're all trying to strive for this point so that we can get to a point in our lives. Like, even if we know we'll never get there, it's like we at least think we have the ability to strive for it, where our life will be magical and we'll have everything that we need. That's what we're all secretly wanting and desiring. But we don't want that to be created externally. Do you see what I'm saying? So what is the purpose of our life then? When someone says it's not even possible anymore, you can never get to that point. People will just go nuts. So mental instability is only going to increase, which means the only way that the Great Reset point will work, which it won't work ultimately, is to continuously try and get more and more and more control and restrict more and restrict more. That's why I think the cyber pandemic thing you brought up earlier, that's why it's a part of it, is because they have to be able to restrict even how we speak online and all this stuff. And that's just going to be the cover for that. I mean, even before 9/11, they had the Project for the New American Century saying we need to have a Pearl Harbor style event to usher in new controls over individual freedom, so we can create more security. And then fucking that's exactly what they did afterwards. Are they creating it? I'm not saying they're creating it, but they're showing you what the intention is of when it happens, which it's inevitable that there's going to be some kind of a thing because people are unstable. Somebody's going to go and do it just because they want to be spiteful. And then they're going to use that point to then create the control that they want to create. So at the end of the day, who needs to be responsible for that level of control in society is people who have real principles, people who are going to do what's actually best for everybody. And not just in saying they're going to do what's best, because that's what the people at the top are doing right now. They're saying they want to do what's best for everybody, but that's not actually what they want to do. And it's not even about trusting that's what you want to do. It's about actually being able to show that's what you would do, actually doing it, trusting yourself and actually doing it. And the more control you're trying to put into place, that should show right there, you don't actually have the starting point of what's best. Like, at a certain level, there is an instability. We do need to have safeguards in place that a person can't harm everybody else. But that shouldn't be the starting point of everything you do, is just to try to get more and more and more and more and more control. You should at the same time say, okay, how can we educate everybody to a point where it's clear to them, it's obvious to them that you wouldn't ever want to hurt somebody? Because if you don't do that, the only option you ever have is just to control everybody.
Yeah.
You see?
And
so everything that's being done right now is create as much instability as possible, take away everyone's purpose. And then, oh no, look, all these terrible things are happening. We have to control everybody. Hey, it's for your own good. We got to do it. But let me ask you this. Do the elite even know what to do?
No.
This is the only thing they know how to do.
Control.
So you can't just hope and pray that someday, well, maybe they'll just do it and they'll get it and they'll figure it out. It's not going to happen. It has to come from the bottom. It has to come from us. Meaning it has to come from people who are not already brainwashed by power and control. You see what I'm saying? Who are saying, even though I'll never get into that position of total power and control over everybody, I still want to do what's best, and I'm not going to accept where I'm at. And when I say we'll never get into the position of total power and control, is the only way you and I are ever going to get to that position is by removing all of those elements from us that wants to control. Because the challenge of removing all those elements within yourself, starting with your own pursuit of happiness, starting with being a parent and starting and parenting from the starting point of not trying to control your children, but actually support them. You see, you're doing it in that microcosm. You can't do it unless you start removing these points from yourself. You can't have a relationship together where you're not just trying to control the other person unless you start removing these points. So by the time you get to the point, and see, how do you get into the position of power and control? I mean, not that that's their starting point, but what we would call that position of, let's say, authority in the system. Can you do it on your own?
No, of course not.
No.
Not if you're coming from our side of things. The only way you can do it is by creating a network with a bunch of other people. So what does that mean you have to support them with?
Being able to take responsibility in their own lives.
Doing the same thing, removing those elements from themselves. So when those people, the people that we're supporting, our group, let's call it, the group with principle, certain people get into the position where you now have authority, the only way you got there, or you could have gotten there, was by supporting yourself and supporting other people. So the network you formed is the group that would then be able to direct the system in a way that's best for everybody. Not because it's based on trust, but because that was the only way you could get there in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
How did the people who are in control right now get there?
Fucking everybody else over.
Yeah, by being the most evil motherfucking people. How did Bill Gates get to the point of being so magnanimous?
Yeah, by being the most evil motherfucker.
How do you get to be the most evil fucking person and then get to that point and be like, oh, and I just want to help everybody and I'm just going to do it? If you don't even think you can change over 14 years, how did this guy fucking change overnight? How do you live your entire life until you're what? I don't know when he retired from Microsoft, like when he was 50, maybe 40. I don't know. How do you live for that long being absolutely ruthless and then suddenly switch? Like, how are you Warren Buffett? And all you cared about your whole life was accumulating money for yourself. And then suddenly you want to help everybody. And when someone like that says, hey, we should all pay higher taxes, you have all the fucking money, just pay it voluntarily then. They're not doing that. And then people think that they're charitable. They think Bill Gates is charitable because he gave all of his money to charity. Well, the name of the charity is the Gates Foundation. It's not like, it's like you literally just were like, look how charitable I am. I'm always giving money. You're like, well, no
One
shit.
hand to the
What are
other.
you doing with it? You're just controlling more and more. And I'm not blaming those people. I'm saying they're there because they were the best in the competitive system. It's like, and here's a problem that I see with people who argue for capitalism, okay? Which doesn't equal, like being against capitalism doesn't equal being pro-communism, because there's elements of both that are cool. But the people who are like, no, billionaires are billionaires because they worked hard and they were the best in the system and they educated themselves and they changed their mindset and all these things. Okay, so why are you complaining about them now? Well, I don't complain about I don't want the communists to take over. Okay, why is communism so mainstream right now?
When you say mainstream, what do you mean?
If you tweet about how great communism is, are you going to be on the cover of Vogue?
Yeah, you could be.
You see what I'm saying? Are you going to be on the cover of fucking Time magazine?
Yeah.
I mean, you guys saw that Klaus Schwab, The Great Reset, was on Time magazine. Okay. What I'm saying is, if you're pro-communism, everything is promoting you.
Yeah.
If you're pro-capitalism, no. Okay. Now that seems like a contradiction, right? But who gives you the voice to be pro whatever? Is the media companies. The media companies are the result of being the most competitive in the system. They're the ones promoting communism.
Why would they do that?
Because they're not really promoting communism. Do you see what I'm saying? They want the masses to say, yes, communism is great. It's like, imagine you have 10 people in a room and you can convince 9 of them to give up all their possessions.
Then that means they go to me.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's what's happening. Because if you even read the article from the World Economic Forum that we're talking about, that Asif referenced, right? It's that to the year 2030, I own nothing, I have no privacy, and life couldn't be better. And they say everything, you just rent everything, you don't actually own anything. It's great. I'm like, well, who owns the stuff that you're renting?
Like, who are you renting it from?
Who are you renting it from? Because do you really think they're going to do a great reset and Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos and all these people are going to give up all their property? Is it being promoted right now to everyone give up their property?
Mhm.
Why? But so will Bill Gates give up all of his property?
No.
Here's how he'll do it. He will. He'll give it all to the Gates Foundation. And he'll be like, look, I'm just like you guys.
No, I'm even better. I donated it. Wow.
But will he still have a fucking private jet?
Yeah.
Yep.
While everyone else isn't allowed to have any kind of travel that's not green? And they'll justify it by saying, but they do X, Y, and Z. You see, it's always going to be that. So there's never going to be a point where the people who are currently in power and control are ever just going to willingly give that up. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. You know,
The only way you can make it happen is if everybody becomes so educated that there's just no one left to control. Because when you're educated, you just don't care about other people trying to control you. You just do what you're going to do. That's why the elite are able to do what they're doing. Because they don't feel like they're being controlled by anybody. They're just like, I just do whatever I want. Do you know what I mean? Like, they don't care. Like, look at these governors who put these mandates where you're not allowed to go fly or travel. They're like, we don't want anybody to do that. And then they immediately jump on a plane and go visit their family. And they get caught and they're like, well, I made a mistake, but and also I have duties. I have to be somewhere because I'm promoting the city. And it's like, okay, so literally just exactly what you would think would happen is like the people who get into communist control say the rules don't apply to them. It's exactly what happens.
right. Right.
You see what I mean? Now, here's the thing, though. When I say anti-communism, what is actual communism?
Communism is when the people own everything. It's
Yeah.
supposed to be, right?
Do you see the you see the little lie in there?
Mhm.
Is the Great Reset and all this stuff that's being promoted right now actually communism?
No.
It's just saying the vast majority don't own anything.
Right. Right.
Is that the same as everybody owns everything?
No.
Because if everybody owned everything, okay, just bear with me for a moment. If everybody owned everything, wouldn't you still want to have a house of your own?
Hell yeah.
Is that antithetical to everyone owning everything?
No.
You see the difference? Everyone can own everything, and yet we can all agree, hey, everyone should have their own house where you can always go back to, you can make it your space. But if you read these articles from like the Great Reset, World Economic Forum, all this stuff that's being promoted right now, they're like, you'll have a house, you won't own it. And when you go somewhere, somebody else will be using it as an office and shit. Like, I mean, that's literally what they're saying.
Yeah, read the article if you haven't read it.
It's like, oh, it's great. I mean, I don't, people are in my house doing whatever the fuck they're doing in my room while I'm not there, but I don't care. It's like you literally have nothing that's yours. And isn't there enough on this planet that everybody can have enough for themselves?
Mhm.
Of course.
Everyone can live like a millionaire.
Mhm.
But you don't need any control over anybody else. It's like, I'm okay if I have a house, you can have a house, it's okay. All right. That's why, what's the problem with that? But that's not the same thing as everybody give up all your property to the state.
Mhm.
And then they will just manage it and everything and it'll be fine. And it's like, if you think that Trump is so fucking evil, you think he's the only evil person on the planet, but like Bill Gates, he's not evil. No. And it's like, dude, Bill Gates is a better billionaire than Trump.
Oh, way better.
Like he's like 10 fucking whatever, 50 times better than Trump at being a capitalist.
Yeah.
And you think, and that's the guy you're looking up to because he wears a fucking Mr. Rogers sweater. Do you know what I mean? And like, how does he get a Netflix documentary? And what's really cool is people don't know this, but and I think it was like you, Drake, that kind of mentioned this point initially, which was like how he got this whole image, right, of the Mr. Rogers sweater and all this stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because when he was in the antitrust lawsuits with Microsoft, he got a PR team because he originally lost. He got a PR team and they were like, you need to act this way and speak this way because they just think you're a fucking egotistical asshole and you're going to lose. So then he won on the appeal because they totally redid his image. You don't think he just took that to a whole nother level? Like this guy learns too. And it's like, you got to come across a certain way.
Yeah.
When did he make that switch? Go back and watch the videos when he wasn't the same person. But no one will do that. Why? Because nobody has time, because we're all too busy trying to survive. So imagine if there was a world where we weren't trying to survive all the time and we actually had what we needed, you wouldn't let things go by like that. And if parents had environments where they didn't have to always focus on survival, they could actually spend time with their kids.
Mhm.
But that's not going to happen just by giving up all your rights to fucking Klaus Schwab and all these people, or whatever his name is. Because they don't care. Like, think about it. Bill Gates. Jeff Bezos, right? Look at the stories about the people who work for Amazon, like how grueling that work is. Do you think he cares?
He cares a lot. He cares
He must
so
care
much.
so much, right?
Yeah, he cares
Like,
so much. He
The
wants
people,
all
even
the-
the people who work at the executive level, they get totally burnt out.
Yeah.
It's because they just like suck everything out of you.
Yeah.
And people, it's like, oh, I don't understand how people can just buy into all this stuff. It's like, dude, people believe in God. People believe in heaven. People believe in fucking Santa Claus. They believe in all this bullshit. It's not surprising at all. Why should we be surprised at all? The only thing that's interesting, what's fascinating about the masks is people have now, it's like society has now created a visible image of how dumb they are. It's like you can just look around and be like, oh, okay, everyone's actually dumb.
Going back to that point that you brought up about
That's so funny. That's so funny.
that
And
point that you had brought
even
up,
the fucking guy getting out of the Mercedes and the Bentley is putting the mask on.
right? Yeah.
It just shows you, just because they made a lot of money doesn't mean they're smart. They still believe the same bullshit as everybody else. They're still afraid.
Yeah.
Okay.
That point that you had brought up about like we're living in a movie and it's just playing out that movie. It's the same thing that you see in the movies of like also the point that Asif had made, how there'll be this sleeper agent and the magic words are said and then that agent will come to life. And like to a certain extent, I don't know if you guys have had this, but I know for myself, I would watch those movies like the Bourne Identity, all of those Bourne movies, right? And wanting to be like that, like, wow, he doesn't remember his past. He just like woke up. He's a fucking killer. He just does that shit. It's just automatic. I wish somebody would program me like that. I remember having those thoughts watching those movies, right? And the reality is we are programmed in that way. It's just not as glamorous as that. It's just what we've been programmed for is we're the fucking bad guys. We're the ones who are destroying the system, but it's just not with like, oh, I'm kicking somebody's ass and I'm so cool and I got away. It's like, I am just going to go along with whatever the main villain says. And yeah, I'm going to defend him. And we're actually the minions, not the cute little yellow guys, but like the minions of the henchmen.
Henchmen.
The henchmen of the system. And it's not even like a certain villain or anything like that. I think Cameron's face froze, right? But it's not even
he's back.
He's back. But it's not even like a specific villain, but rather the system itself. We are the henchmen of the system. And that's what we're all participating in.
Like if you look at the movie The Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Everybody thinks they're Neo, but they're really all Agent Smiths.
We're all Agent Smith, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's
Hey, think about this. When in history ever has the elite been like, hey guys, let's just create a society that's best for everybody? Even though we're totally in control of everything, let's just, you know what? This is the time we need to do.
But that's the perception that they've been given to. That's the perception that people have of them.
Who's creating the
They're
perception?
doing it for what's
Yeah,
best.
who's creating the perception? Yeah, the media, which is an arm of them.
It's like people are so fucking dumb. They actually are like, well, I mean, guys, come on. Like, we would know if they were doing something bad. I'm like, you mean like CNN would tell you? Like the company that they created to fucking lie to you all day would tell you. Is that what you think? And people actually think if the TV says it. It's like, do you understand what a TV is? Do you understand why TV programs exist?
It's a program.
Hold on. Yeah. It's so that they can run the advertisements. That's why. It's so they can advertise to you. It's not just because they just want everyone to have some entertainment. And then even the entertainment itself is always one way. It's always programming you to be a fucking irrational loser based focusing on the pursuit of happiness. There's this movie I remember with Julia Roberts and that British guy, Hugh Grant. And it's like, I just think of every movie and every television show and everything always like that movie. It's like her whole focus was on just trying to like get this guy. It was called Notting Hill. I remember seeing that when I was a kid with my stepmom. And I don't know why that movie sticks out, but it's like, it's just, imagine your whole, like for like a whole year, your whole focus is on just trying to get this guy to love you. It's like, that's your whole purpose in life. What about all the other stuff that you had to do this whole time? But like when you watch a movie, it makes it seem like that was the only thing going on in this person's life was just them trying to get this relationship with this person. And people live their life like that. Like they think that's their career or something. You know what I mean? It's like, you have this idea of how you think things are going to be in the future. And it's like, but you don't actually control anything about your life. Your idea of what you're going to get is like somebody was like, here's some options. You're like, yeah. And you didn't even actually choose the option you chose. It was given to you also. They put the other options there to make it seem like you made a choice. And then people think that that's real purpose and that's real identity. And now they're doing the same thing again with all of the other stuff that's going on in the media, where it's like they're giving children an option of, oh, you want to express yourself. Okay, well, you're a woman. Okay, well, then you should be a man. That's how you express yourself. Oh, and you're a woman. Oh, you're a man. You should be a woman. Yeah, that's how you should. That's freedom of expression. What if they're like, well, I want to just like be a man? They're like, oh, no, come on. What do you want to be a slave to your biology?
Where'd you get that idea from our sexist, evil culture?
That's crazy.
Hmm.
You're a woman and you want to be a mother? What is this, like 1950s? Oh, you're a man and you want to be a mother? Hey, brave, free expression. That's amazing. It's like, why is it? It makes no fucking sense. And then the problem with it is nowhere in this equation is someone like, well, what's actually best for society? It's like we want to create a society that's inclusive of everybody and everyone feels like they have a place and everyone is recognized. And the best people to do that are the people who have never been doing that ever. And also, we shouldn't change our starting point of why we live our lives the way we do. We shouldn't change. We should just not change anything about anything, but then demand that society be more inclusive of everyone. And it's like, it's that starting point of pursuing happiness while everything gets fucked in reality that's creating all of the conditions, which is creating all this instability in our childhood, which is making us seek for all these artificial ways of expressing ourselves because we don't feel like just being ourselves physically is enough. It's like I have to put on a certain type of clothing and color my hair a certain way and act in ways that make no sense whatsoever, because only if I do that am I expressing myself and then do I have real freedom. People believe that freedom is the ability to choose to do something that makes no sense. And if I'm not doing things that make no sense, I'm not free, clearly, because if I was really free, I could do anything. I could do anything, even things that don't make sense. Like, that's not freedom. Freedom is the ability to choose to do what's best in every moment, even if it doesn't feel good. You know what I'm saying? Because you understand the consequence of it. That's real freedom.
And let me be more specific about why that's freedom. Another way of saying that is being able to choose what is best, even though you've been programmed for something different. That's where the feeling comes from. Feelings are programmable. That's why doing things despite how you feel is the proof of your free choice, because you've been programmed to feel a certain way. It's like somebody, what was that, Drake?
It's a good way to say it, Asif.
Somebody explained to me why, or the intellectual or societal value. And I mean actual, not like facetious, oh, it's the control. I mean, what's the actual value of learning how bad Hitler was in school?
So that we will never do that again.
Right.
That's what we're told.
Right, exactly. It's like we have to learn about history so that history doesn't repeat itself. But then the proof that school doesn't work, the proof that nobody processed anything, is we're literally recreating that. I think we should put all these Nazis in a camp and get them out of society. It's like, Trump supporters or white supremacists or whatever it is. It's like,
Or people not wearing a mask.
right. It's like people's ability to take an example, take the concept from it, and then apply it to different examples is total garbage. All we learn from it is if something looks and sounds like this example, then it's evil. And the only way I can know if it looks and sounds like that example is if it's told to me from the teacher.
Yeah, if somebody labels it as that example.
Right. And the creation's journey to life it's so cool when we're going over those blocks together. It's saying, teachers are gods. The TV box is God. That is if people define God as a creator, right? It's like the TV is creating you.
By programming you.
Exactly. The teacher is creating you. And the fundamental point being we're not taking responsibility for it. And we think it's in our best interest. And it's like, I remember Cameron explained this probably like 3-4 years ago. I only understand it over the last year. But that's the point of the concept of education. It's to put things inside of you so that those same people can draw on that later to control you. And if anybody here has a mother, you'll know what that's like. Because even when you grow up, if you're in contact with your mother, right, it's like, even when you grow up, they're still using that point of, that's what a good son would do. That's what, but I'm your mother.
Mhm.
If you hear the term, but I'm your mother, it's like they're drawing on something from you as a kid. It's like, oh, this is what I see my family members doing, and I realize it was done to me. You're never going to leave mama, right? And there's going to be some girl that comes try to take you away, but you're not going to leave mama. All that stuff. I'm watching my cousins do that to my younger cousins, right? It's like, do you see how that's putting information in them? And then when they're in a relationship and they're making decisions that would make sense for their child or whatever, and the mom's like, no, you shouldn't do it like that. And you're like, Mom, I got this. She's like, oh my God, I knew it. You're going to let her take over what I want or whatever the case may be. And then that child is controlled. They're like, oh crap. Because one of my friends was telling me how their friends are like just totally, they want to get married or something like that, but they're not doing it this way because the guy's mom said so. The guy's mom wants it this way. It's like, why are you still listening to that? That's what real education is.
Not ready to get married.
Exactly, right? It's like you're not ready to get
Mom.
married if you're still just listening to your mom. That's what education is. Education is the way information gets into you, right? But people think it's done through, when you're reading books or when someone's the information that people are speaking to is not that. That is to draw on the emotional point that got put into you. That if you step out of line, then you're an asshole and you have to step back in line.
Yeah, I wanted to add something based on what you were saying earlier. It's like yesterday we were out walking, Katie and I, with the kids, and I can't remember exactly what it was, the context we were talking about, but there was something where Max said, I remember he was laying in the grass and he was like, when I'm 24, then I'll ask you about something, because I forget what the context was we were talking about. But he was like, but when I'm 24, I'll ask you about it. And I was like if he can do something, right? And I forget what the context was. But I said to him, I was like, Max, when you're 24 years old, you'll be making your own decisions. Like, you won't be asking me to do anything. Like, you might ask for my advice on something, but you're going to be making your own decisions. And Katie was like, yeah, when you're 24, you'll be an adult. You're not going to be, you'll be taking responsibility for yourselves. She was like, Cameron and I, our parents don't tell us what to do. Like, we have to make our own decisions. We have to take responsibility for ourselves. This is what I'm telling my 4-year-old.
That's so funny because even now I'm still told the opposite. I hope that as you grow older and you get this point in your life, I hope you always still listen to us and all that.
No way.
Remember that. I hope that when you get married, you don't forget. I hope that when
I hope when I grow old and I no longer can do this, you'll take care of it for me.
It's like, why do you have to hope for that? Isn't it so obvious that Max is going to grow up and be like, yeah, it makes sense to like take care of my parents because of, you know, what they supported me for, so I should support them back.
Yeah,
That's how what I had to realize on my own, because the the points of forcing people to do stuff. It was so funny. I forgot, they did some study on like, regardless of the effectiveness of the vaccine, if you're forcing it onto Americans, 40 or 60% of them are going to reject it. Like, even if it could absolutely be completely proven beyond a shadow of the doubt that it's like, there's no side effects, blah, blah, blah. If you're forcing it, they're going to be like, fuck that. I want my freedom, which is an interesting concept, because it's saying that if you're trying to control me or force me to do something, then I'm going to say, fuck you. But isn't that in everybody? It's like, I know just because you told me to, I'm not going to do it. But then people take it. It's like, if you were having fun doing something, right? You're playing soccer, Mitch, Drake, Karen, you play soccer. And then I was like, me and Jessica were like, you guys have to have fun. You guys have to play soccer for the next 20 minutes. Are you going to be like, fuck you? No, we're not playing soccer anymore.
I'd be like, well, I'm just not having fun right now.
But that's what I see the pattern of, for example, if we're saying in many different contexts, whether it be how to raise children or this, or like for women, it's like, you would probably be happier if you didn't have to work. I know I would. What are you saying? I can't work?
Look at that. Do you have to work in this world?
Yes.
Are you forced to work?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do people think that they are?
No.
So it's not about whether you're actually forced, it's about whether you think you're being forced.
Yeah.
Which is a key point, because the main thing is not about that's the reaction that comes up, versus the right thing to do is, if I was playing soccer and having fun and you're like, you have to play soccer, I'd be like, okay, I don't care. Like, okay, great, in your face, right? It's like, but the reaction that comes up if you're saying that it's restricted, you can't do this, then it becomes a problem. And what I'm suggesting is, this is why it can't be done by force. It doesn't mean that because something was law before, it was wrong. It doesn't mean that something that was forced is wrong, but it just goes to show that if you're not supporting the individual to take responsibility and see that for themselves, then it's never going to work. And this is what comes back to why us as individuals, people who actually want to take responsibility for educating the population, because like Cameron said, you cannot manipulate people if they're equally educated as you. You can't force them to educate themselves. All right. So for those people who are listening to this, like Mitchell was saying, you're not making a difference if you're just listening and blah, blah, blah. It's like you're making a difference in the world when you, within yourself, you see it's your responsibility to share this with other people and support them through that. But the only way that you can do that effectively is if what? You can actually fucking to communicate to people. You can sell people on the idea that just you can go from here to here. Because then when they're there, then you can take them to the next step and to the next step. And that's what Cameron did with me. That's what we all did with each other, actually, at all times. Seriously, right?
At the end of the day, look, at the end of the day, what makes the rules in our society?
The laws.
Right. So do you want a society where most people, enough people, are able to be manipulated emotionally so that somebody can pass laws that restrict everyone's freedom and are not to everyone's benefit, except a few?
Yeah, fuck that.
Which is the point of the Heroes Act or the Don't Kick Puppies concept. If an act is called like the Don't Kick Puppies Act, or some movement is called
Patriot Act.
The Patriot Act, Black Lives Matter, Dog Lives Matter, Human Lives Matter. It's like, if it's something that inherently you're like, obviously I don't disagree with that. It's like, then why'd they call it that? There's something below that or beyond that.
So if you want to have a society where you're not forced by the majority to do shit that is not in your best interest, the only thing you can do is educate everybody. Because again, it's like, I mean, just think about it. If you were to sum up all the problems in this world, it would be not everyone has everything that they need, which means there's no law that says everyone has to have everything they need. But then somebody might say, well, but that's communism. That's this terrible thing that's going to be like everyone's controlled. It's like right now, everyone is arguing that everyone should be controlled. That's what everyone's arguing for right now. Enough people are arguing for it.
Yeah.
So any fear that we're going to create dystopia, if we try to create utopia, we are creating dystopia. It's as like you're already doing it. Okay. So think about it. Which makes more sense? You're going to create dystopia by trying to create utopia, or you're going to create dystopia by trying not to create utopia.
Right.
Like, doesn't make any fucking sense. But the only reason people reject the idea of utopia is because, again, they don't believe they can change. They believe there's always going to be evil people. Well, let me put it this way. If we created a system where everybody had what they needed, why would anyone ever be able to take advantage of you? What would the evil person do?
Try to take control over other people.
But how would they do that?
Uh,
Like you always have enough
Well,
food.
how's it done now?
No, I'm asking you, how would it happen? How would someone be able to control you?
Kill you.
Huh?
They'd kill you.
Kill you? Okay.
That's about it.
That's pretty much about it.
Unless somehow they figured out a way to stop supplies for your basic needs to be met.
Right.
But then that's literally the opposite. I mean, like, yeah, that'd be evil.
It's cool that you
because-
said that though, because
Mhm.
if I create a system that says you can have everything you need, but I'll take it away if you do something I don't like.
Right.
Isn't that what everyone's like? Hey, if we try to create utopia, that's what's going to happen. They're just going to try to create this control system. And it's like, they're just going to really, okay, that is fucking literally what is happening right now. And everyone is going along with it. Like, oh, we got to take control of like this pandemic. And I was reading this other article talking about, well, if we don't do X, Y, and Z with the climate, then we're going to be facing climate lockdowns. And it's like, oh shit, guys, do you not realize like the lockdown of everybody staying in your home because there's like a pandemic? It's like, oh, you guys are okay with lockdowns. Oh, okay, cool.
For shit you can't see.
There's an epidemic of racism in your area right now. Like, you better get inside. Otherwise, the racists are going to they're going to give their rhetoric to you or whatever.
They're never going to want you to leave your home.
That's what I'm saying. Like, it'll be like, there's too much carbon dioxide coming out of Seattle, West Seattle. Everybody go inside and you can't come out for 3 weeks. We have to lower the carbon dioxide levels or whatever. And you're like, it'll always be something.
mm-hmm.
It'll always be something. And it'll be, I mean, I'm just looking at it about like, if I was an artist and this was like my palette, I'm like, oh, what kind of lockdowns could I think of?
Right.
You know what I mean? And like, if you give the authority of the government to do that, to lock you down because it's in the public interest. I mean, isn't that what everyone is afraid of when we talk about communism? Is like the community, the idea of the community being more important than the individual is that the individual basically becomes like a controlled slave. But then people think the alternative is, well, we have to then just have unfettered capitalism. Because if we don't have that, then you don't have any freedom whatsoever. I mean, that doesn't make sense either, because, and this is what I was trying to say earlier, if that's your argument, then understand the people who are arguing for communism right now are the people who are the best capitalists ever in history. So how can your solution be, oh, we just need to have capital? Well, there's too many government regulations. Well, yeah, you could say that, but the people who are the best at capitalism are going to go and they're going to create the governments and they're going to get all the laws passed so that they reduce all their competition. Like, what's the purpose of competition? Like, think about it. If the purpose of competition is you're going to make the best thing and everyone in society benefits, because if it's competitive, then everybody will compete. And if people don't like something, then they won't buy your product if there's something bad about it. Right? Then what's the most popular beverage?
Mountain Dew.
Coca-Cola,
Do you know what I'm saying?
Pepsi,
What's the most popular like snack?
Lay's, chips.
Like, Yeah, like Doritos and shit like that. It's like it's not
Cheez-Its.
the best thing. Because if the principle itself is just competition, then it's like let's just find the best way to compete.
But what's the problem?
The assumption is the best way to compete is to give everybody the best thing.
No, it's not.
Not the best way to compete. It's like
It's the most addictive thing.
right. And, okay, when I was in high school, I went to a college prep, and so we would have these student body elections, right? I'm sure everybody has those, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But it was an all boys school, so there's like a different dynamic, right? And I remember when I was a freshman, and they had the student body elections, right, for like the next year. So it's like the juniors are going to run for class president and all this stuff. And we had this school like TV network, right, where we would have like our morning announcements and all that crap.
Right.
And so they would allow the people who were running for student body president to give a speech over the TV, right, to everybody, and then you would make your vote after everybody does it, right? And the guy who won was the funniest guy. It was like the guy who was the funniest. And you know what he did? He was saying, it's like a trope in movies, right? He's the guy who promised that we're going to get a student lounge with free snack machines and like all this shit, which you knew wasn't going to happen. And I remember it was really funny because he was like, we're going to line the walkways between the classes. It's like an open campus with loquat trees. So as you're walking to class, you can pluck loquats and dine on them. And he was like really funny. Right? And that's the guy who won. And he didn't do any of that stuff. I mean, I don't even think he could do any of that. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter. It was just, I don't even know what the point of the president thing was. Like, what was the point of it? But what I'm saying is the way he won was just by saying a bunch of stuff that was totally irrelevant. It was really funny. And everybody just was like, that guy's hilarious. So was it by actually in any way saying, I'm going to improve the quality of our education here or anything real? So how do you compete? It's like everyone, I was thinking about this too. Why is being an entrepreneur so popular with young people today? I don't know if it's young people per se. Maybe it's just people like maybe my age or slightly younger, but like you guys are all in your 20s. So it's still within your age group, like a popular thing, like being an entrepreneur, the grind, the hustle, everybody wants to be Tai Lopez and all this stuff. Right. But is that actually possible?
No,
not for everyone. No.
And when somebody's like, I want to be an entrepreneur, it's like, what do you want to sell? They're like, I don't know. It
doesn't matter. I just
it's like, what
time and money freedom.
Entrepreneur?
I just want to be free. I want all my basic needs met no matter what happens.
It's what it's done from I was just thinking about this. It's gotten everybody off of the idea that I need to have a job.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, because it's like if you're the elite and you're playing chess and you're thinking years in advance, it's like, and think about this. Does the TV promote being an entrepreneur? It's not the TV. It's the internet that's promoted this.
Yeah, social media.
It's AI algorithms promoting ads and stuff.
Is who's watching, what age range is watching TV versus what age range?
You know what I mean? So it's like the AI is basically saying to everybody, you're not going to have jobs. You need to be an entrepreneur. It's getting everybody off of that. But then if you're not allowed to own any property, how can you be an entrepreneur?
Oh, online.
How? You don't own anything.
But watch this. What's the next big thing in the Great Reset going to happen?
What?
Cyber pandemic.
Cyber attack.
Yeah.
It's like they're concentrating all the young folk, the ones who are questioning things, right? The ones where the education system didn't suppress them enough, where they're just like, I'm just going to get a job and stick with a corporation for 40 years and no problem. It's like, fuck, what are we going to do? It's like, let's start preparing them to let them know that we're going to take out where they're centralized, the internet. Like, that's crazy. Like, how are you going to predict a cyber attack?
How do you predict a pandemic?
It's exactly, for those of you who listen to Kevin Trudeau and Jin, he says the elite or me or you as an individual, you don't have to try to predict it. He's like, you know how I predict the future? I create it. Create the future. But isn't that what we're all doing? We're like, yeah, we know what the future is going to look like because we're going to make it happen. All right. Now, imagine if this podcast was being well, if people could hear this podcast because they were educated to in the first 7 years of their life, and then this podcast was being blasted out to every household in the world. Now, imagine if you didn't give a shit about doing what's best for all. You just wanted power and control, but you had access to getting into every household ever. It's like, what would be the result of that? Exactly what you're seeing right now.
Mhm.
Right? It's like, by the way, I got information that there's going to be some cyber attack. I don't know why I think that, but it's something to prepare for. So if you guys need help, if you guys want us to manage that, we got you. And there was this beautiful video. Did you guys see that video that Bill Gates made? It's so funny. I ended up making a playlist called interesting ... And there's just one video in it because I was going back through my playlist. There's one video in it and it's Bill Gates, 2-minute video, beautiful video. He walks into a beautiful room. He's 3D printed a graph that says the population, it's like super increasing. And here's the population growth rate. So year by year, it's like 1.1%, 2%. Like, oh shit, like the population growth rate is increasing. But over the last few years, it's been actually decreasing. And the reason for that is I would say, it's like the suicide rate is way higher because people are way more fucking depressed. They don't see a future for themselves. If you ask an individual, they're like the average millennial or even Gen Z, they're like, I don't want kids. You ask them why, they give a couple different reasons, but one of them is like, I don't trust myself to take care of that. Like I'm not in a position because I have all these student loans and I don't have a house, right? I won't be able to afford property. Right? It's like
Some people don't even think that far into it though. Some people are just like, oh, I won't be free anymore.
Right.
It's
But
just
a lot of people,
personal preference.
That's true.
The one I hear a lot is, I don't want to bring kids into this world.
Exactly. Why?
Because you're here.
Specifically you, Asif, because Asif is here.
I mean, the person saying it. That's what I mean. I don't want to bring kids in this world. Why? Because I'm here, and that's fucking terrible.
Yeah.
Right,
Right,
exactly.
right.
It's like because this world's terrible. But so wouldn't that make sense about why the population growth rate is declining? Right? It's like clearly people can't see a future in this world. That's good to bring kids into. But what does Bill Gates say? The reason why population growth is declining. Right? What is Bill Gates in charge of for the world right now? Health. He says the reason why, and it's so beautifully, if you guys watch this video, I'm not talking about the people necessarily listening to this, but I trust that you guys have the processing ability to see what he's doing. And he extrapolates the graph like it's reality, 2030, 2050. He's like, the reason the population growth is declining is because of the advancements in health technology.
How does that even make sense though?
You know, people don't need explanations, Drake. Bill Gates said it. It's an authority. And what he does on the graph, right? It's like, I don't know if this is left to right. I don't know, whatever. But I'm just going to do it this way. I'll do it this way, right? Because people.
No, you had it right the first time.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So it's like population growth like that. This is to 2020. It's like
Yeah,
elbowed up,
yeah.
right? And then, sorry, that's population size. And then population growth is here. And then he's saying, but because of health increase, population growth going down, this is 2020. So if we extrapolate that graph, we keep increasing health, you leave me in charge of health, right? Is the subtext. It's like population growth is going to go way down and population is going to level out. See? Look at the graph. And he lays out the graph into 2040 and 2050. So I remember we have our clubhouse in Ottawa, right? And I'm explaining these things. I'm showing them that video. We find another video and it's again, beautifully done. It's about I'll give you my overlay on it. Bill Gates is a salesperson. He's selling you on something, right? It's so obvious, right? But it just looks like documentative, like a documentary, right? 2 minutes, South Africa, or Africa. We were doing good in controlling malaria and the deaths were going down up into 2020. But because of COVID, 2020 and beyond, the death rate is going to go like this. That's the death rate. I'm like, but is it though? Because 2020 is right now. How can you, right? But he does it so beautifully. He's like, we were doing such a good job in getting out the malaria vaccine, blah, blah, blah. Because hospitals, something, 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 mouth some gibberish, the death rate's gonna go like this, 2020 and beyond. So that's why we need your support in basically giving me control to fucking take care of that. I'll be the guy to take care of it because I'm such a good guy. So it's like it's masterful salesmanship as to creating the problem that you don't even know exists yet. Do you know what's going on in Africa? Absolutely not. So he has the freedom to dictate that to you so that you say, oh shit, man, it's so good that Bill Gates is out there doing a good thing. Right?
Got
Drake, were you going to say something?
Take care of us.
I don't know. He's going to say something. But that point that's being seeded into us, right? It's like he'll help out there and then he'll expand that globally. It's just the most expert salesmanship that I've ever seen. It happens so quick when he's doing these graphs. He's like, oh, look, it's like, how do you know that the death rate is skyrocketing based off 2020? We're using models. What models? The same one that predicted fucking 50 million deaths or whatever?
The ones
Remember?
that use climate change.
Right,
How
exactly.
much do you think it would cost to buy off like a leader in Africa? Just any country leader.
US dollars?
US dollars.
Probably not very much.
Right?
That's a good point.
Like think about like, because I'm just thinking about the vast majority of people's perceptions of Africa is like this poor, like
Right.
poor place,
Yeah.
right? And so from the conversations that I've had with people who are actually, you know, their network includes people who would be leaders of Africa, right? In the conversations that I've had with them, their understanding of how things work is the leader will get some money and then they'll try to disperse it to the governors. And then the governors basically go, well, we're getting 10 mil. So we only really need 1 mil for the project, you know, and then I can keep the rest, right? And then they do some shoddy job and they keep the rest of the money, right? If you were like Bill Gates had control of hundreds of billions of dollars going into a country where you only have to buy off these governors, say, hey, you know, and you're making it seem like it's actually going to be beneficial to the governor's land and everything. You're like, but look, here's the deal. I'm going to give you some money so you can administer this program or whatever. But I'm also going to send my team in there. We don't want to be bothered. You know, we don't want to be bothered. We just want to make sure that we, you know, administer this properly. You don't have to worry about anything. You're going to get your own pay and all this. Like, how easy would it be to just go in at that level?
That's so true.
Right?
Yeah. That's such a good point. And because I don't remember where I heard it, but it makes so much sense about one incentive for the elite to have poor countries existing in the world. It's because no one gives a fuck. So you could just go there and do whatever. Take whatever kids you want, try the little experiments and all that stuff. It's like, interesting.
And it goes back to that point that Cameron was making. What if we were all at the level of a millionaire? Because there you can clearly see, all right, well, if you just have millions of dollars, you're not going to be able to go in there and buy off even like one governor, right? But if you have hundreds of billions, you're like, you got free reign. You got so many get out of jail free cards. It's like, oh yeah, another one. So,
Oh man.
Yeah, there's no reason for there to be billionaires.
Yeah.
Like if everyone was effectively educated, there would be no reason. And the problem is people think that if you have communism, that means you're going to control what everybody does. Right? Like you can't do this and therefore you won't be happy. But that's already occurring. You see what I mean? That's already occurring. Like you, based on your vocabulary, you can do certain things, you can't do other things. So no one really knows what freedom of expression is. No one actually knows what real freedom is. And the problem is people can only look at it as either capitalism versus communism. So when we say everybody has what they need, it's like, oh, okay, so what's the catch? What's the catch? It's like, why does there have to be a catch? Why can't everyone just have enough money?
It's like catches only exist because you have people who have to make profit, but they have to convince you that it's in your best interest.
Think about this. If you were a millionaire, let's say you had $1 million, what would you do with that $1 million?
Buy a jet, a Lambo, get some girls,
Yeah.
blow
And
some
you're not gonna
cash.
be a millionaire for very long, but that is
You
almost
would not be a millionaire for longer than a week, dude.
okay.
Probably a day, honestly.
For what? I would go hard, bro. All week.
Well,
I would live stream the whole thing.
Yeah, make a
if you're an
million.
actual millionaire, okay, and you have the vocabulary of a millionaire, why wouldn't you go buy like some apartment complex or something?
Yeah.
Mhm.
In other words, what if you just got 10% return
Mhm.
on your $1 million? What would that be?
Yeah. 100,000.
Every year. Divide that up. That's basically 10,000 a year, let's say, or a month, right?
Mhm.
So you would take that money, you would put it to work, and you would get like, let's say, I'm just making up a number of 10,000 a month, right? So if everybody had $10,000 a month just coming in every single month, they would be a millionaire.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So in that scenario, if you had $10,000 a month, what could you do? Most people can't even imagine like what that's like, which is like, it's funny because when you make even that much, it's like, it's not that much, but people really think that's a lot of money. But what I'm saying is if everyone just had $10,000, let's say $20,000 a month, you have all the best food that you need.
Yeah.
You know, you'd be able to travel, you'd be able to have all the appliances and things that you want. You'd have plenty of money.
You'd have the time freedom. You'd have the car. You'd have your security, your clothes for your kids. You'd have literally everything that you need and everything that like. Here's a point of we were talking about responsibility earlier, and Cam, you'll probably recognize this, but like working with some clients, some parents that I work with, they'll ask me, what should I do for my child's education? Like they'll ask me, like their kid's not doing well in school. And then I'm like, okay, your kid needs to start, studying and doing this stuff or whatever. And they're like, okay, so how much would you recommend? Like, why don't you know like how to get your kid educated? Like it'll be something really obvious. Like you were saying earlier, I think this is before this call, but the kid can't do math, right? And they're like, okay, so what should we do? Like fucking work on math, like teach the kid math, obviously. Like they don't know math. Like, why haven't you taught them math up until this point? It doesn't.
Like if you can't figure out like how to get your kid to understand how to add or something, it's like, what are you doing at your job?
Right.
Like, how are you even competent at anything?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you can't get a child to understand how to add numbers together or how to multiply or anything basic that you know how to do, how is it that you're competent at anything?
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck is it that most people do at their jobs? And I was looking at this other point too. We're talking about university, right? Everybody had to go to university, right? But there's no more jobs. But university was supposed to guarantee that you could get a job, right? So what are most people getting jobs with university degrees getting jobs in?
Teaching.
It's not just teaching, it's all this social justice shit.
Mm.
Like, look at how the expansion of these like diversity and inclusion and all this stuff.
Right.
Now, no wonder you have so many people talking about it now. Do you see what I'm saying? Because it's the only thing left. And it's like invading every single company that exists, which plays right into everything. But I'm saying, what actual skills do you have if you went to university and then now you work as like the HR manager at a company and your whole thing is just to detect all the racism and sexism and punish everybody? No wonder that person can't
actually
teach their kid
exist.
math.
Yeah. These actually exist. It's 100% true. And it's very, 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 very extremely prevalent in Canadian government.
That's like the government just starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger to make room for all of that.
Like to give you guys a little context, it's like you have the equal to the Congress members, right? they're giving speeches, right? The cabinet, the ministers, people are writing speeches for the ministers, and every speech that passes through to the minister, it has to go through, it has to get feedback from different branches of government, such as the diversity and gender equality group and things like that. So it's constantly being passed through these filters that say, oh, you're supposed to say the word transsexual instead of this word. And then that gets published, and it turns out it's total chaos. You completely disrespected the transgender community by saying the word transsexual, because the correct word is transgender. And it's like, oh my God, now we have to make an apology speech. And it's like all within this bubble of like, you know what I'm saying? It's like just being cycled through of like, okay, now we have to apologize because we passed through this filter, and they can't even, certain people can't do the jobs effectively, and get a little excited here. But the point is, it's such a good point. It's like, you don't have to be good at math to do that.
Yeah.
You don't have to be good at much of anything other than who's writing the curriculum on what's racist and what's right, and what's left, and what's friggin' up and down, and what's, gender equality, and what's diversity equality, right? Who's writing that? It's like this closed loop of the people who are writing are the people who go into those positions who then write it. You see? So then it's like the people who are outside of that are like, oh, I don't really understand. Like, am I supposed to use this word or that word? It's like, you'll never understand it. It's changing like month by month. That's why it's not good if you say, it's not good enough to say racist anymore. You have to say, or it's not good enough. You have to be specifically anti-racist. You have to be anti-black racist, because anti-white racism is okay now. That only happened very recently, right? So unless you're on top of this stuff constantly, it's the equivalent of, you guys ever see, it's like the people in the academic sector, the professors, like doctors and stuff like that. They're like, yeah, we need to stay on top of the people who actually study it, right? It's like, yeah, we need to stay on top of the research because there's new research being published every week, for the advancements in technology. It's like, now it's like, oh, we have to stay on top of political correctness because there's new political correctness, or the rules are changing like every week.
I have people on my Facebook who argue that they're doing more in regards to racism because they're keeping up with those things. They feel justified in their existence because they know people's preferences, and they continue to study and investigate what's the newest trend, what's politically correct right now. And they feel like that's how they can give back to those communities that are suppressed, is by keeping up with what is politically correct.
So it's really good that you said that, because what it got me to realize is, because I was thinking it's like people are doing this like it's their day job. But imagine you can actually get paid for that. That's what these groups are. But imagine, right, that when everything goes to some kind of social credit score where you only get your monthly stipend, or your what is it, universal basic income, if you're following these things, then you literally get paid for keeping up with that stuff, right?
That's a good point.
So that's where things are going towards, which is really crazy.
So if you want to be set up for the future, then go on Justice Facebook and friend those people and start up with them.
Right? Because it's like,
I have so many social justice warriors on my Facebook. It's wild.
Just because weeding them out. You're making a list and going to put them in concentration camps like they're going to do to you. That's what they're going to do to you. So whoever does it first, right? I'm just kidding. So the medical field, or the scientists, right? It's like they have to go to the public. What's the organization called that publics the scientific research journals? Anybody know? Anyways, there's a database where research articles are published regularly. So that's where they go to keep up with it. And then you ask, like, where would these social justice warriors, or the diversity groups and all that stuff, where would they be going to keep up to date with what's politically correct, or what's racist and not racist, or good to say, right to say, wrong to say, all that stuff?
The news channels.
Oh, you mean behind the paywall?
Behind the paywall, it's literally just Twitter.
Yeah, they tell you what you can post and what you can't post.
like you could just go and find out what's getting flagged. And that's what you want to make sure the minister isn't saying. That's what you want to make sure your political candidate is not saying. Right? It's like, right? It is really smart. I didn't think about this stuff, man. But it's like Joe Biden, does any of this shit get flagged? Right? You guys saw how Candace Owens is suing the fact checkers because she said it was illegal to say that Joe Biden is the president elect. Right? Or I
Yeah.
think she said he wasn't the president elect, and then they fact checked her, and he's like, "That's not true. It's illegal to say that because it's not true by law."
Wow.
And then so she filed an appeal, or she filed a suit, and then the fact checkers were like, "Oh, we reviewed it, and we decided that it's okay for her to say that." It's like, no, you were fucking wrong. Like, so now I think she's suing the PolitiFacts or whatever it is, the organization that does the fact checking.
Nice.
But it's like that's the world we live in now. It's like every single one of the tweets, every single one of them that talk about election fraud or anything like that, there's a flag. It says, click here to learn more about election. And then it brings you to some Twitter written article that says, what does it say? Like, it's extremely unlikely election meddling or whatever is very rare. That's all it says. But now content being flagged, it's a symbol. It's a symbol of what what he said earlier is, okay, so in order to understand this stuff, what we're talking about is like, you got to go watch Century of the Self. You have to go take the time to go figure this out. But we're all in such survival mode that we don't have time to look into things. So what do we rely on? Is Twitter flagging it? What are the comments saying about it?
The comments.
Right? You see what I'm saying? Or the retweets or the tweets, who's tweeting back at it. So it's like, you just flag this thing. It was so funny. I was watching, you guys know Paul Joseph Watson?
Oh yeah.
He makes some really cool videos, right? He makes some really cool stuff. His best videos are the Modernity 1 and 2 and 3. He makes these really trippy videos that are really cool. But in one of his later videos, he's showing that somebody said the voting software that was used in the States was used in like Venezuela and somewhere else. And then they got like fact checked. This is totally false. And then in the article, so you know how if you click on the link, it brings you to the PolitiFacts article or whatever. And at the top, it's like, this is what was written. It's so like funny that he would say that, blah, blah, blah. It's totally false. And then it says, yeah, it's true that the software got used in Venezuela. Yeah, it's true that this and that and this. And then there's like somebody else made a picture of like how they were saying what was false. And then they drew a line to where they said it was true in the same article.
That's so silly.
It's like the third video on his channel or something like that. It's second or third video, something like that. But that's the state of the union, is like, who's going to figure that out? Because who's even going deep enough to read that? And then when you read it, you're not even processing of that because you already had the first impression, which was this is false.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right.
Wow.
That's a really great point to bring up. And this ties in with your own processing ability, because a lot of times what happens on both sides of the argument, on either side of any argument, is people will just agree with the person that is like them, or that they agree with, or that they like, or they sense is intelligent, or makes them feel good, or whatever it is. Right?
Case study. Cardi B v. Candace Owens.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. And so on either side of that, right, you got people who are retarded on both sides.
Right.
And I say retarded because I hope we're getting deplatformed soon. But I say that actually because both sides, neither of them are actually looking into it. Neither of them are actually doing the research themselves. They're just parroting what somebody else said that sounded good, right?
Yep.
And they're arguing from this emotional state of how it's gonna, like, I have to hold on to this because otherwise they're gonna take this from you. Something stupid like that, as opposed to just being able to go, yeah, well, I hear what you're saying, but here are the facts. And this is it. You're wrong. And then that person can argue whatever. Is like, okay, that's great, but look at the facts. Can you read them? What does it say? Are you understanding them? No? Okay. Well, let me just explain what it says right here very clearly, plain as day, without coming from an emotional point or an emotional starting point. Most people cannot do that or are not currently challenging that within themselves. And that's what we're saying that is fundamentally different. It's not about being on this side or on that side. It's about being able to process that information, not from emotion, but actually from reality, from practicality, from like actual understanding of just going, ah, that's what it said. Okay. And that's really the benefit of being a part of this group, is that everyone within this group is basically just challenging you to like, well, did you investigate it yourself? Like, are you just being manipulated and persuaded? Either, on this side or that side, it doesn't matter. Or are you actually looking into it yourself and seeing what it is for what it actually is, not according to this person's viewpoint or that person's values or whatever, but rather what reality is based on. And that's just one more quick thing. Most people's minds, and we were talking about this earlier, why people don't want to give up the things that they've attached themselves to or whatever, why people need to forgive those things, is because in their mind, they place a lot of value on that. But reality, there's no value in that, right? The reality is there's value in water, right? There's value in food. There's value in shelter. There's value in doing what's best for all. There's value in education, right? Because you need education in order to actually understand to do what's best for all. But we have this value in culture, is what we were saying earlier, right? There's no actual real value in that.
Yeah, it's like they're valuing victimhood, and as many areas of as possible to be a victim gives you value in this system, because then other people can feel bad for you, other people have to accommodate for you, other people have to take responsibility for you, because you can't, because you're a victim of this thing. You're a victim of these abuse, you're a victim of this mental instability, this emotional instability, psychological shit. I mean, like, you have all this stuff that you're a victim to, which then gives you the right to not take responsibility.
Yeah.
It gives you this free stuff from the system. It makes other people feel sorry for you, and you identify with it. It's who you are. I am anxious all the time. I am depressed. I have ADHD, and I can't focus. And
Dude,
sometimes I'm a little schizophrenic, and sometimes I'm bipolar. I mean, I'm here and I'm there, and it's just who I am. I was born this way, and this is how I completely identify myself as a being.
Jess, that's such a great point, because I need to make a correction to what I just said. There's value in it to the extent that you can manipulate others. Right. So
Yeah.
that's what
clear.
I'll give well, I wanted to go back to what Drake was saying when he was describing. He's like, that's why this group is so good, because if you're saying some shit, if you're just repeating stuff that you heard, you'll get questioned. You'll be like, where are you getting that from? Where is that coming from? Isn't that exactly what DIP light is?
Yeah, only you do it to yourself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then you have a buddy to cross-reference it with.
Exactly.
Well, that's pro.
And that's on light too.
That's true.
And so the point there is to realize it's the same thing. The beliefs about yourself, like if we talk to somebody and they're like, yeah, I feel like I'm blocked from getting to the next step. Okay. And we're like, tell me your situation, right? What's going on? And then we're like, okay, wait, right there. Do you not see how you're holding yourself back? Like, why do you believe that if you do that, it's like the wrong thing? It's bad, it's evil or something. Oh, I can't do that. Why not? It's like, there's some belief that you've accepted from somebody else that you didn't look into for yourself, and you're using that to guide your decision making.
I can't do that because I'm a good son.
Right, exactly. Right. So it's like there's so many different things that we do that for. So what we're saying is, within the group or this process, it's the It's the developing the ability to critically think. And it doesn't happen in one day. And if right now you think you're the person who can critically think, who is not doing what we're doing, then you're getting goofed on. Because that was me. You don't realize how retarded you are until you're not completely retarded. It's a process, right? It's a process. Like, I know I'll do the Alex Jones. I gotta be honest with you guys. I gotta be honest. I'm kind of retarded. That's my best Alex Jones impression.
That's pretty good.
But it's like,
Wait, are you Alex Jones?
surprise, typical hat.
Joe Rogan, you're literally a genius. You're literally the smartest human that's ever lived. I'm an actual ape. I have the intelligence of an ape. I'm an idiot. Don't listen to anything I say. It's like, all right, dude, stop drinking.
Exactly. Like, I'm gonna come back on election day. We're gonna get lit tonight, right? But
Oh
it's like I used to not be okay with the word retarded because I was just reacting to it. But I'm saying it's like you're stunted in your maturity and your
Why?
development
Hold on. Why are you allowed to say retarded?
because of
Because there are people who have mental illness that will feel bad because you're bringing up that they are slower.
They don't care. It's not them who feels bad.
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
you know, it's funny in
Yeah.
at the start of I think the Protocols of Zionism,
Hmm.
they're talking about the word Jew as an epithet, where it's like when you say that person's the Jew, it's like there's some, or for a long time, there was like this inherent feeling of like you're saying something wrong or bad just by saying the word Jew. But he's
Yeah.
like, that's not what the word Jew is.
Right.
This refers to Judaism, right? And it's like that thing, that has been imprinted in so many words for us. And retarded is one of them.
Yeah.
But if I said somebody, like, if I said, oh, good, that flame's retarded. Imagine if people were like, oh, wait, what did you just say? Like, we got to focus on you correcting your language, and then the flame is no longer retarded, and now it's going to burn the building down. It's like, why don't we just figure out? Well, that's what education is. That's what we're suggesting, equalized education. Because what is education? Remember when we got asked that? We're like, well, education is this, education is that. And then Avery broke it down so simply. He's like, education is every word that you know, can spell, and comprehend. Isn't it so blatantly in your face that the proof of somebody not being educated is calling a Jew a Nazi, calling a black person a white supremacist, right? Like all these little points of like, oh, communism, like nobody should own anything. And they don't even realize they're like arguing for just a small group of powerful people to own everything.
Mhm.
But going back to that point, it's like what Drake was saying is that's what we do for ourselves and for other people and for what we see in the world, what we see in ourselves and what we see for the world. And it's something that you have to develop. So if you already think, oh, I'm already a critical thinker, it's like, I only started thinking that, I thought that the whole time since I was in school and all that stuff. I got the good grades on critical thinking parts. So I'm pretty sick. But, physics is like the hardest class. I got one of the best grades in physics. So I'm pretty sick. Not realizing until like last year, I'm like, holy shit, I just critically thunk for the first time. Like last year. I'm like, oh, this is what critical thinking is. Like putting the pieces together and investigating something deeply to put the pieces together for yourself, right? And then you come up with it doesn't mean you have to reject other people's conclusions because it's from other people. It's you're coming to that conclusion also on your own. Because then you'll be like, oh, that's why that conclusion doesn't make sense, right? And a lot of it came from like the Black Lives Matter and all that stuff, right? Where police brutality and all that stuff, looking into it myself. And even before that. But the point is, it's like, I thought I was critically thinking before. I thought I was questioning everything before. That's what it means to critically think, questioning everything. Now, and going to what Jess was talking about, what was the point that you were making, Jess, right after Drake spoke?
Hang on.
Oh, shit.
You said critically thinking is questioning everything?
Yeah.
How do you mean?
Like
Because
that.
Because if you just question,
You just did it.
but if you just question everything, right?
Right. Sorry, that's a great point. It's like you can't just stop there. Is what you're saying, right? It's like,
Yeah.
you want to get to the depth where you gather the information so that you can draw a conclusion. But if you're doing that based off what other people are saying, if you're doing that, well, like if you're drawing your conclusion based off what's the most popular thing, or like,
What
I
makes
keep
us
saying
feel the best.
right, exactly. But Drake, I can see that you're trying to refine that even more clearly. So
Yeah. Because
you're seeing something that I'm not.
Because okay, when you're in school, right, and then they have like you read through the textbook or whatever, the chapter, and then at the end of the chapter it's like critical thinking, and then it has all these questions for you, right?
Mhm.
That's literally the opposite of critical thinking,
Right.
because it's telling you what to think, it's telling you what conclusion to come to. It's not giving you the discernment. Like critical thinking is really using discernment and actually being able to understand and synthesize the information yourself.
It's like, is it just me, or does anyone else just critically think while you're reading? I mean, that's what I do.
Yeah.
I don't go at the end and be like, no, let me write down some critical thinking questions for myself.
Well, you know what, Drake, that's a really good point, because if I give you a bunch of information and then I say, and then I ask you the question, what was the title of this paper and the author?
What?
It's like, why is that information important?
It's not relevant.
How does the ion channels in the electron transport chain change polarity in order to? Why is that important information? But subconsciously, we're getting programmed with that's important, right?
But it'll be something even more subtle, like you're in a history book, and it'll be something about the Pilgrims or whatever, and it'll be like, critical thinking would be like, how did the Pilgrims not recognize their inherent white privilege in regards to their exchange with the Native Americans? And it's like already framing how it wants you to think about it in terms of what you get out of it. And so what'll happen is, anyways, in school, the kids will go, hey, what did you get for critical thinking question number 7? Okay. And then they'll try to change up what the other person wrote to like change it a little bit. So they're not even really doing any critical thinking.
Another cool thing about that is just by asking the question, right? It already formulates in your mind. Like KT talks about this somewhere in level 1, where he says, like you have a mental file clerk, right? And so the way that he's forming the questions, or the way that he's presenting this information, it automatically starts you thinking, oh, well, how did the Pilgrims not realize their inherent white privilege? Man, I guess, yeah, like you already believe that they have white privilege. You're not thinking about like, you're not even asking the question like, did they have white privilege? Like, how is that even true? You know what I mean?
I just sent you guys a link in the chat, and this is actually, as Cameron was bringing that up, and what you're talking about, it's the perfect example, because I saw a more like raw picture of, here, this is what I'm showing to my classroom about Black Lives Matter. This is what I'm teaching. And it's so funny. There was I think it was Ryan Long or somebody else. Oh, no, it was somebody else. It was in one of Paul Joseph Watson's modernity videos. And it was somebody, it's like they're going to a college campus and they're asking them like, what do you think of America? Blah, blah, blah. Right. Racist, blah, blah, blah. They're like, okay, when did America gain their independence? What year? Like nobody has any idea. And they're like, okay, who did they gain their independence from? They're like, nobody has any idea, and they feel all stupid and stuff like that. And then one of them, she's like, I'm actually a teacher. And she's like, I'm a teacher, so I should know this, blah, blah. She's like, I actually teach my own. And the interviewer had asked them, oh, don't you teach this stuff? She's like, I actually teach my own curriculum about BLM and protests and all that stuff. Right. So in the picture I sent you guys, it's exactly what you're saying. The first question is, what is a protest? Second question is, what are people protesting? So that right there alone, let's say like a protest is to express your disapproval of something, right? Is what the child would answer, right? And then what are people protesting? It's like police brutality and racism against Black people. It's like right there, the job is done.
Boom.
right? But it keeps going. What is systemic racism? How can we stop systemic racism? What's the jump in logic there? That systemic racism even exists.
Yeah. Also, that like that's what is being protested. Oh, now I have to learn about that systemic racism, and then you finish all of that, right? And you just had a day at school, and now you can forget all about it. But this was your fucking sleeper cell agent training.
Right,
Going to be
exactly.
awoken in you 15 years from now when you're like, oh shit, it's back.
A racist lockdown.
What was that?
Okay, racism lockdown. Okay, quick, get back in the home.
There you go. There you go.
And it's just Drake, I'm so glad that you brought up that point of what critical thinking is, because I could see that you were looking at it more critically, right? And it's such a good point, because that is how we're programmed to see. Sorry, I'm looking at what you wrote in the chat.
Oh, there was just a quote from that article.
Okay, right. Is the teacher pushing her own agenda on the students? And a community member said the answer is yes. It's like the way you do that is through education. Only if somebody's uneducated.
But what's so fascinating to me is when parents get upset about what they're teaching their kids in school. It's like,
Yeah.
Why did you send them?
don't
this
get to
book?
have an opinion about it because you're too fucking stupid to educate your kids. You said you need an expert to do it. Why are you questioning the expert? It's like, are you going to decide what your kids learn or not? And
That's
as
so
long as
true.
your person doesn't talk about X, Y, and Z, I'm okay. It's like, well, then why don't you just fucking do it? Why are you complaining about it? And what's also ironic from that article is when it says, hold on, where did it go? The part about, hold on one second. It says, oh, these conversations are critical for our white students, but our black and brown students especially, because it's acknowledging their experiences. And it's like, isn't the whole point about systemic racism is that white people get a better education?
Wow.
But you got white and black kids in the same fucking school, and you're trying to teach the white kids that they have privilege, and they're sitting in the same fucking classroom as black kids. So where's their privilege? You see what I'm saying? It's like, what do you want them to do about it? They're in the same classroom. What are they going to do? Like, well, but they're at a disadvantage because of all these other reasons. Like, but you're in the same classroom. So how is one person getting an advantage of the other person? Do you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it's a really good point, because then it becomes this unsolvable feeling of
That's what I mean. Yeah.
guilt.
It just
And-
becomes guilt, nothing else.
And this is why it's so important to study this stuff, the creation's journey of life, heaven's journey of life, how it explains that internal feelings and energy and all that stuff is expressed externally through money. And it goes back to what Jessica was saying, how basically the hierarchy of the social hierarchy now is no longer like who's the smartest, who's the greatest. It's like who's the biggest victim. Right.
But look at this real quick. In the schools, okay, like where would you solve racism, systemic racism?
The top.
No, but really, where can you solve it? What is the problem with systemic racism?
It's systemic.
It gives some people an advantage over others.
Hmm.
So where would you level that playing field?
In the classroom, make it all equal.
In education,
Yeah.
right? Like you would give everyone the same education.
Yeah.
Because how else can you solve it? Like you just tell the cops to stop being racist. Like that's not going to do anything. The only place you would solve it, hypothetically, in the context of the system, is in the classroom. You educate everyone the same.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But this just shows you how little of a clue these people have, because you would think every single moment you would want to spend making sure those black kids learn every single thing they can to become really fucking smart and educated. Yeah, they're spending time on teaching them and the white kids how there's racism. So that's how much time they have. You see what I'm trying to say? Like that's how little they're actually caring about real education. Because you would think you wouldn't have any fucking time for it. Like, okay, yeah, there's racism. Well, I don't need to worry about teaching these kids that. I need to spend every single moment I can making sure they learn everything they can learn to become really smart. Because then no matter what, because what is it that the claim systemic racism is? It's like no matter what, if you're black, if you're super fucking smart and you're charismatic and you have effective communication skills, no matter what, you're still gonna be fucked. Is that the lesson?
Because the classroom days didn't get longer. They're taking away from something in order to teach that.
Yeah, it's like they're not teaching you anything. They're just framing it so that when you get into the point where CNN goes, and the black people or another black person has been killed by police because of systemic racism, you're like, yes, that's that thing we were told about. Oh, we got to go riot and shit.
And hey, at the end of that worksheet, what did it say? Do you guys see that? At the end of the worksheet, at the end of the works sheet says, what are some things that you can do to help end systemic racism?
Well, they already told you at the beginning.
Exactly.
Protests.
Exactly. So it's like this closed loop. It's like obviously right there. So that's why it's so cool that Drake, you brought up that point of if the questions are being given to you and all that stuff, the critical thinking is done.
Yeah, it's like, what is a protest? What are people protesting? What is systemic racism? You don't go, well, those aren't related. You go, oh, it's racism. And then you say, how can we stop it? Well, protesting. What's the Black Lives Matter trying to do? Protest systemic racism. What are some things you can do to help end systemic racism? Protest.
You ever hear your teacher say
How
that?
can we stop it? Protesting. You're like, well, it's all right there. The answers are right there in the fucking thing.
But you ever hear a teacher say that? The answer's right in the question.
Yeah.
Right? Or just guys. just
Yeah,
going
they do.
questions, right?
That's what I always loved about tutoring for the SAT. Like when I was tutoring students for that kind of stuff, I'd always be like, look, the first thing you need to understand, first of all, is that they're telling you the answer. They're telling you the answer. Okay. First of all, realize that. It's not like you have to figure it out. They're telling you the answer. It's right there in front of you. You just don't know which one it is, but it's there. So you can use that information.
Hmm.
So a lot of times you don't have to actually even do any work. You just look at the answers and it'll be like, you'll have 5 numbers in numerical order. And two of them can't make sense because they're too much. And then you can just break it down from there so that you don't even have to actually understand the question. That's what they call critical thinking now.
Yeah.
So in terms of the Drake, you want to say something?
Yeah, I did. I just want to say that, like, what you were saying as far as critical thinking is like, it's not just questioning thing, because anybody can have questions. You can be dumb and have questions.
Yeah.
Right. Critical thinking is not just questioning things. It's having the understanding enough to know that, hey, I don't have all the pieces of this puzzle together yet.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this doesn't add up. It's being able to. It's really being able to add with vocabulary, right? That's really what it comes down to, because you can see that the equation is just like, this isn't a balanced equation. This doesn't make sense. Or yes, I can see where this goes and this goes and this goes. That's real critical thinking. And it's, as Cameron was saying, like, you do it while you're reading, while you're getting the information. You're balancing the equation as you go along, so that you know by the time you get to the end of it, whether this makes sense or not. Or even like midway through, you're like, this is fucked, right? That's real critical thinking. I just want to be really clear about that, because a lot of people, they hear, oh, ask questions, and their low vocabulary understanding of that is they just ask questions. They just continuously ask questions, and they don't actually do the part of putting it together and actually understanding it.
And their questions are, what do we want? Justice. What do we want it? What do we want? The point I was making on what Jess was saying about how it's like this victimhood hierarchy. Going back to the bigger picture, if the way to gain control externally is to give everybody a bunch of debt that they feel like they can never pay off, and then say, hey, we'll wipe that out for you if you give us control, then internally, isn't it so convenient that everybody thinks that the worse you feel, the better? The more of a victim that you are, then the more everybody should bow down to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because then everybody's fighting to, okay, wait. Okay, so black hair. Oh, wait, shit, that's pretty popular. Brown eye. Oh, shit, that's pretty popular. Oh, I'm brown. I'm going to use that. I'm oppressed because I'm brown. But then the brown girl, she has more. I'm like, fuck, damn it. She has more victimhood than me. So I should do whatever she says, and so on. So the hierarchy goes, right? So if you're like a brown, Asian, transgendered male to female. Damn, you're fucking lucky. So in terms of the hierarchy or the goal being who feels the worst, that's the debt inside, right? That's why I was bringing up Heaven's Journey to Life. Feelings inside, money outside. The debt outside is feeling like shit all the time inside. So if the Great Reset is, or one of the ways that the elite is taking control is, well, wipe out your debt, just give us control. It's like, what about when the Neuralink is just attached to your brain and it's just shooting you with dopamine, 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 where you could just sit on the couch instead of having to sit on the couch and find the right Netflix channel, like find the right show, decide if you're going to rewatch The Office for the 4th time, or if there's a new show that's good and all that stuff. It's like, you just put on the Neuralink. You just, hey, eventually it'll just be like, you feel so shitty. Just let us put this thing in you and you won't feel shit anymore. You just have to give us control of your feelings.
Dude, that's pretty boss, actually. Like, just imagine that, like, you put this thing on and like throughout your day, you just sit there and you just feel good. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to find a Netflix channel, nothing. You just sit there and this thing is just hitting your dopamine, right? And then it's like,
Look at Jess.
and then it just stops. And it's like you run out of dopamine for the day. You have to go do XYZ in order to get
That's
and then you're just like, you feel like shit and you're like, fuck.
It's like dopamine
Watch,
credit.
watch this ad for some dopamine.
Yeah,
Watch
watch this.
this. Watch what is politically correct in order to get dopamine.
More dopamine coins.
All right. Now, for those and you guys listening, now go listen to Revenge of the Ego by Bernard Pullman.
Oh, shit.
That is what your ego's doing all the time.
Mm.
Your ego is like the policeman that makes sure you stay within the system. That's it. Because most people, not most, anybody won't stand up and do things that don't give them stimulatory pleasure.
Mm.
So they won't stand up and do something that matters in this world because they're still looking for that dopamine hit. They're like, well, if it's not giving me that, I'm not going to do it.
Mhm.
And what will happen is as you stand up within yourself, as you walk this process, you'll walk through periods where you feel like absolute shit. And then it's like this little test. Are you going to just be like, fuck it and go and do something that makes you feel good? Or are you going to do the thing that you need to do that's on the other side of that thing of feeling bad?
Mhm.
That's real self-motivation.
Yeah.
Right? Is when you're like, look, I don't feel like it, but this is what I need to do because it's what's best.
Mhm.
And that's why you're going to be tested over and over and over and over again until you don't care anymore.
Yeah.
That's why I'm saying you can't just go based on feeling good. And all these people who are protesting and all this shit, they're getting dopamine from it.
Mm-hmm.
They've been programmed to feel good about it. So they're feeling good. And plus they're doing a lot of drugs and stuff at these protests and all this stuff. Anyways, it's like, why would you even go to one of those protests?
It's like a big party in the street.
No. Huh?
It's like a big street party.
That's all it is.
Your friends are going, yeah.
Your friends are going, you're drunk, you're high, whatever. It's like something to go do. And it's funny because you don't see any of that right now. It's all done. Didn't need it. It's funny because it's like, oh, after the election, they're just going to vanish. It's like, well, yeah. There's no more police brutality, which is pretty cool. They solved it. I wanted to bring this up earlier, but you remember a little while ago, you were talking about stuff in Canada. And I was looking into that bill C, I think it's called C-16. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And I read it while we were sitting here. And it's interesting because they talk about this whole transgenderism thing, right? And they give this whole history of discrimination and they give all the reasoning why. It's just like when you read, remember we went through the Equality Act or whatever?
Yeah.
I forget what it was called. We went through the one in the US.
Yeah.
They're so similar. They give this whole like fucking history so that they can justify all the stuff they're about to say. And so I started looking into this because have you guys ever heard this term that like there's a genocide against transgender people?
Mm-hmm.
You ever heard this, right?
Yeah.
People saying that.
I haven't heard this one. I've heard genocide
Really?
against every other people except for the transgender. This is news to me. This is crazy.
Okay, so yeah, I've always heard this because it's like we have to protect these people because there's a literal genocide against them. That's what's always said. So I mean, of course, when you say genocide, it's like, oh fuck, like that's really serious, right? It's the same thing like when you talk about Hitler or you talk about any of that stuff.
Or a biohazard, right?
It's just like immediate, like you don't question it, right? what do you want people to be genocided? It's like, no, of course not. So I was looking at like, okay, because I hear it's the same thing when we hear racism today, right? Does racism mean racism anymore?
No.
Because what is racism traditionally is like you're saying something against somebody that has to do with their race, you're making them feel less than, whatever it is, because of their race, the color of their skin, whatever, right? You're
Discriminating.
judging them. What's that?
Discriminating
Discriminating
them.
against them, whatever. Okay. But nowadays, like, so, okay, so if a black person says you're a stupid piece of shit because you're white, then that's racism, right? And people will say, well, no. That's the new definition of racism is you can't be racist against people because racism is really about having a position of power, whether you're using it or not, whether you are doing it intentionally or not. If you're in it, and so all white people are in a position of power because of their white skin, so they can't be you can't be racist against them.
And real quick, like I used to think that at the even like last year, right? I used to think that what Cameron's saying right now, he's doing a caricature until I spoke to particular, like I posted some stuff and then I invited people to have conversations with me about it. And people literally said that. They said, no, you're not getting the 2020 racism. It's about that. It's about power structures and everything in the power structure and all that stuff. So that is not a caricature of what's being shared, to be clear.
Yeah, which is crazy that it seems like it is, but that's how absurd it is. You can't tell, is it real or is it not? But anyways, to move, okay, so I pay attention to these things, right? Because I'm always seeing everything on Twitter and everywhere, like what people are talking about, all this stuff, right? Because it's, how can I put it? It's being used to keep people, like y'all said earlier, in a perpetual state of victimhood.
Yeah.
Okay. If somebody comes along and says, I want to do what's best, I want to empower everybody to take responsibility for themselves. Is that what the people who benefit off of everyone else thinking that they're victims want anyone to do?
No.
So now they got all these people thinking that they're victims. This person comes along and says, I want to support everybody to take responsibility and not have to be victims anymore. And everybody, we can have a much better world where everybody's equal, really, in terms of equal ability to really make a great life for everybody. Mm-hmm. What do you do over here? If you're the one who wants power and control,
Shut them down.
you go, remember we told you about these people that want to kill everybody and destroy everybody? And
Yeah.
that's the one right there.
You know,
Because they're saying that you can take responsibility for your life. They're not recognizing that you're a victim. They're trying to make you feel bad about being a victim. They're trying to make you feel like you did something wrong, like you're doing something wrong, like you need to change. When in reality, it's the person who's oppressing you that needs to change.
you know, from their perspective, that actually makes sense. Because I'm just going based off of what you just said, as far as like, okay, well, we were kind of playing with that idea with the Neuralink and the dopamine, going back to, okay, well, that's what your ego is actually doing. If you're the ones who would benefit from it, and you can see that that's what everyone's actually doing, then instead of having like a real solution, their solution is, well, I want to be able to replace that system with a system that I control, where I can do that. So I can then predict what they're going to do. Because otherwise it's not in my control. It's not predictable. And they could just ruin all of this for all of us. But if I'm in control, I put that in them. And if somebody else is coming in and says, no, you should take responsibility for yourself, they're fucking it up, because then they're going to allow chaos, what they deem as chaos, because they're not in control.
Yeah.
Right.
They just want all of the reward and benefit to go to themselves.
Yeah.
Right. So they're trying to maintain that control.
Yeah.
So when you look at this whole total discussion, now you bring in not just the racism, but you bring in trans issues, right? Which is another point where it's like perpetual state of victimhood.
Yeah.
It's like I'm also a victim to the fact that I was born in this body and I don't feel comfortable in this body. And it's not that, like, I'm a male, but I want to express myself as a female. And society says, since I'm in this body, I have to express myself this way. Well, so that's a form of oppression, right? Well, now the discussion is that transgender people, there's a genocide against transgender people. Okay. And you can just look it up, like genocide against trans people. You're like, whoa, shit, there's like a lot of people saying this, right? But to you, if I said there's a transgender genocide and you took it in good faith, what would that imply to you?
There's transgender people getting killed.
Yeah, they're getting hunted down, singled out, and murdered.
And I mean, like, what if I said there was if there was a genocide against white people and like you find out like 10 white people died because people didn't like them being white, would you say that was a genocide?
No.
You'd be like, guy, come on. That's just like called normal racism in a fucking world where everybody is fucked up.
Did they all die at one time and in one spot?
No.
No.
But if you look it up, if you have to look up on Wikipedia to get like the easiest like list. It's like list of people killed for being transgender. And it's like in 2019 in the United States, it was like 20 people. And then 2020 is like, it's like 30 something people. And then Joe Biden on November 20th on the Transgender Day of Remembrance said, at least 37 transgender and gender nonconforming people have been killed this year. And it's fascinating because there's an example they gave this year. It was in May 31st of this person named Selena Reyes Hernandez, 37, was shot by a man after they went home with this man. And then after they, like, I guess to have sex or whatever. And then they told him they're transgender.
Afterwards?
Yeah. So the guy, I don't know what transpired and when they told him or whatever, but imagine somebody who's low vocabulary, very emotional, and like, they're going to have all kinds of guilt about whatever and, bullshit. And then they're going to flip out and they're going to kill this person. And also, I mean, like,
isn't that sort of, sorry to cut you off here.
No, it's fine.
But isn't that sort of like what they're teaching women in universities to call rape?
That's kind of where I'm looking at it. It's like, imagine if you were, imagine you're a guy, you're a man, and you want to have sex with this woman, and she's a lesbian. And you pretend to be a lesbian woman, and you go home with her. And then she finds out you're actually a dude, and you've been like kissing her and all this stuff and fondling her and all that. And then she's like, what the fuck? I was just raped by a man.
Right.
Wouldn't you like, people would be like, that's totally unacceptable.
Right.
But in this context, it's acceptable the other way around. And when I look at the context of it, it's like, because the guy who was the victim in this context, well, not the actual victim. Well, it's kind of confusing, right? Because the actual biological man who thinks they're a man, right? Okay, is a man. So it's like, you're wrong automatically because you're a man, and you weren't accepting of this person. But it's like, just reverse it. Like if it's a woman and a man was like, oh, actually, by the way, I'm actually a man. And they're like, whoa, wait, I just got raped by a man. Like no one would say that woman should, like, what would happen? Like the universe would explode. You know what I mean? If it was like a woman who got raped by a trans woman, you know what I'm trying to say? Like,
yeah.
So what I noticed though is a lot of these cases, it's, they say, though it's funny the way they frame it, because they go, oh, people some of the perpetrators in these cases cite the quote trans panic defense.
What's that?
It's a legal strategy in which the defendant claims they acted in a state of violent temporary insanity because of unwanted same-sex sexual advance.
Wow.
And does that justify anything? Obviously not, but it's like, if a person is misrepresenting who they are to the other person, like how did the person not know right away? And so you have this situation where they're saying that the person who was victimized initially is actually the perpetrator because they flipped out and like killed the person, which shouldn't happen.
Right.
But then to go, see, this is an example of the targeted assassination of people based on the fact that they're trans. And it's like, look, it shouldn't have happened. There's a lot of factors that are going into this.
Yeah.
And then people would argue, oh, see, but the problem is this person was so ignorant because they were just so afraid of this person being trans that they just reacted to it, and that shouldn't have happened. It's like,
that's not what happened though.
But it's not what happened. It's like and I'm again not justifying it, but
it's used in that narrative.
it's like used both ways, like used to say like they're being targeted, but in reality, we just need to educate the world so they're so accepting of trans people and so forth. And we need to change the world so that they're more accepting of people who are trans. But okay, so but what does that mean then? How does that look? How do we adjust the world so it's accepting of trans people? The only way to do that is, but again, how big is this problem?
37 people.
So how is that a genocide? So how do we start changing the world so it's more accepting of trans people? Well, what we need to do is we need to have National Geographic needs to have a cover of a trans child being all brave and stunning and everything. And we need to have more trans actors and everything needs to be trans, because until we do that, trans people are going to be killed. But then what's really going on? We're programming children to be trans. Children will become what we program them with when they're young. You see, that's why there's more trans people, because they keep fucking trying to reinforce it. But what I know is that the people who are doing this at the top levels of actually, because I mean, think about it. Can you just put anything you want on the cover of Forbes?
Mm-mm.
Like, it doesn't work like that. There's somebody's like, no, that's going to hurt my bottom line, or it's going to help my bottom line. And that's why we're doing it. And not just help my bottom line today, like 30 years from now. That's how meticulously these things are planned. And so why is it all happening suddenly at once? It's like this big push. Again, it creates more division, because the reality is when a man has is in a family and has children and has a wife, they have purpose. You see what I mean? They're not going to take a bunch of bullshit as much. If you have purpose, you're more stable. You see? If you're stable, there's less conflict, there's less energy, there's less problems. And then in a system that's based on constant growth by solving problems, there's less money for the capitalist. So now we've finished the capitalism phase, because it's like we can't extract any more energy out of this situation. But people are still addicted to energy. So what are we going to do? Well, they're so addicted to energy, we're just going to hook them up to devices where we can regulate how much energy they get. And who was it that was just saying this about the dopamine, like the Neuralink? It was you were making this point, right, Drake?
Yeah.
It's like, that's literally what this whole Great Reset thing is about. It's about switching the economy from you go to work, you make money, to you sit at home, you get energy credits. And when your energy credits run out, then we can give you a little bit more. Do you see what I mean? And it's only if you say the right things, or if you do the right things. It's not like you get freedom. You do not get freedom in exchange for any of this.
I was reading a little bit of one of these articles on the Great Reset, and they were talking specifically about you would have to do some physical action. Like they're making it so that your physical movements turn into some form of work or that you get paid for, but it's literally creating energy in the system, literally turning each individual into like a battery.
Think about a casino.
Oh yeah.
You literally get people hooked up to a jackpot machine, or what do they call those things? Slot machine.
Yeah.
And then like you put the quarter in,
They've already got you, dude.
you pull the thing. They just need a human body to sit there and put money in and pull the thing.
Yeah.
And they're totally okay. Like, think about the person who owns a casino, and you're just getting people, like, imagine those old people that just sit there for hours and hours and hours putting pennies in there. And they're like totally okay with that.
Wow. It's so funny because the whole point of how the human being is the one thing that's self-willed, right? That's why you can't force people to do it. You have to manipulate them into it, right? You said it so well. It's like they just need a human to decide to come to sit down in front of it.
Mhm.
Why? I know somebody who was totally addicted to gambling, right? And basically it's like it's because their home life was so shit. And she hated her husband, and their kids wouldn't listen, all that stuff. So she would, because it was so hard, she wanted an escape. Surprise, right? Like, isn't that what everybody does? They go do stuff, whatever it is, party, drink, all that stuff. So gambling was that addiction. And it was not poker tables, all that stuff. It was just slot machine. Like it wasn't necessarily like a skill, like, it's just slot machine. You know what I mean? Like slot machine distills it down to the rawest, like you have no control. It requires no skill. Just put it in, push the button, right?
Look at the light.
Huh?
Just look at the lights.
Look at the lights, right? Let the waitresses finesse you and the waiters finesse you, right? And it's like, because of that, gambling became that hit. They didn't even care about making money. They did not care about that. Not at all. 100% not. They weren't like, oh, I can't wait to hit the jackpot. If they hit the jackpot, they'd be like, okay, cool. Now I can just stay here for longer. If they make money, it's like, okay, cool. I played till the money's done. So if you play, you would stay longer, right? So it's like, think about the environment that you'd have to create within the home, within people's lives. If you're like, man, I just need a human body to want to come here. I can't force them, but I need them to want to come here. What you have to create in the home. Same thing what Cameron's talking about. It's actually a really substantial point. Is like people have no purpose, so they get their purpose. Just talking about, we all talked about it. They get their purpose from going to these protests and all this stuff.
How can two gay men raise a daughter?
Make them transgender male.
But seriously though, like, how can two gay men raise a daughter?
You'd have to have a female influence. Like they.
I'm not even talking about how they can like
provide.
I'm not even saying no. I'm not saying how. Well, that too, but also not how can they.
What are they gonna do when she gets her period?
That's what I'm trying to say. It's like,
I know, yeah, like not just like basic, like just raise it. You mean like how do they really support that daughter to show that they completely understand from experience?
not how do they get her to be feminine? That's not what I meant.
Right.
'Cause people might think, well, you just think she has to be feminine. Maybe she can be expressing her. I'm not saying like that. I just mean like she's a physical female, which is different than being a physical male. You have different things going on. Like, anybody ever be a teenage boy before? Yeah.
Mitch?
How did two lesbian women raise a little boy who turns out when he's like 12 years old and starts jacking off on everything? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Jake,
being a boy is a different name than being a girl.
Mm-hmm.
They're different experiences, and you need different kinds of support. You need different understanding. So it's like people are playing with things they don't understand. They're playing with fire, and they think, oh, it doesn't matter. Like it's not. People are not even here in reality.
Mm-hmm.
They don't care. There's this meme that I like where it's like it's like a man and a woman, and they're like have hard hats on and stuff, and they're like, it's like some electrical plant, and the guy's like, okay, you have to take the male plug and put it into the female socket, and the woman's like, well, actually, whatever gender expression, and then the next thing you see, like the whole plant's like exploded. You know what I mean? Because they're like, oh, it doesn't matter, you can put however you want. It's like, that's not how reality works. It's not how reality works. But you said it really well, Asif. It's like, what kind of stability would you have to create to keep people in that kind of scenario, not questioning it, just looking for that hit? It's like you have to be traumatized. Like, I know for myself, I went through experiences when I was young, when I was a child, that, for lack of a better word, traumatized me. And I was always, for many, many years, just reacting to those experiences, looking for some way to feel good and feel stable, and always feeling unstable, feeling anxiety, feeling some kind of like negative thing. The period of time in my life when I should have been really learning about reality and like developing something to become really effective later on, like, you have 18 years until you're an adult. You can like really master something within 18 years if you're supported effectively. But instead, at the end of 18 years, what is the average human being in the first world? They're interested in basically what kind of clothes they wear, sports teams, music, nothing to do with any real thing that they can create and add value to this world. And then we want to talk about transgender people are being killed and is a genocide. And it's like literally 37 people. And it's tragic when anybody's dying for any reason at all whatsoever. except for old age or whatever you want to call it at this point. You know what I mean? But to then manipulate everyone's emotions by saying it's a genocide. So that way, then you can do what? Again, going back to what I was asking earlier, how do you create a world that's inclusive of trans people? What does that mean?
And I wanted to make a quick comment on that story that you told about the person who had sex with, was it two transgender people, and he didn't know, right?
Right, just one.
Just one. Okay.
When you start having sex with 2 transgender people and you don't know, I think you're the culprit.
Only once, it's on me. Only twice, it's no more legal defense. Okay.
But what if it's twice in one situation, right? Threesomes, right? Don't forget equality.
That's like that's like luck of the draw, man.
right.
It's like every man's fantasy, threesome. And this guy's like, yes. He's like your typical man.
He's like, come on, baby.
Trans women. And he's like, fuck.
Like they both got like changed to look similar. So he's like, they're twins. Sick.
Yeah. That guy, you know what? That guy had it coming. He was just
for pursuing that. It's like, it's so easy to argue because that Wikipedia list, it says list of people killed for being transgender. List of people killed for being transgendered. So you hear that story and you read that title and then you hear that story and you're like, that you can argue for that. You can logically argue the reason they died is because they said, I'm transgendered, and the person killed them because they said I'm transgender, because they were transgendered.
see in all of those scenarios, like you're saying, it is likely it had a major factor in it. That's obvious. That's clear.
But isn't it because they lied about it and deceived the person?
Right. But even regardless of that, where's this structural part? You know what I'm saying? Meaning, let's say you have a black guy who is fighting with the cops and he gets killed or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. You can look at that situation objectively and be like, you shouldn't have been fighting with the cops. But then people will try to take that and be like, see, but it's a bigger systemic problem. Mm. Okay. The reason why the cops were fighting with him is because he was black. They assumed he was a criminal, all this extra stuff, right?
Yeah.
But in the transgender situation, like we were talking about, these very specific isolated incidences, where is the systemic part of it? Where's the structural part of it?
It's like very individual.
It's an individualized part. You can see that when you look at it. It's like, well, clearly in this one case, that's what happened. It wasn't like somebody was out there on the hunt and like, oh, you're one of those trans people. Oh, terrible. And that happens too, potentially.
But that's what the word genocide leads you to believe. It's like they're being hunted,
right?
Being taken out. And it's like, I think how many Jews died again?
6 million.
You know the number. Everyone.
And for 2020 is almost done. Just the first number that comes up when you Google is like about 350 for the year.
Over in the world, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but how many people were killed of murder in the whole world this year?
Well, don't wait for me.
I'm going to wait. I'm waiting.
Global murders 2020.
It's gone up this year or gone down?
Guess. More than 400,000 people die from homicide each year. In some countries, it's one of the leading causes.
So 400,000 people, which is like 1% of all the deaths that exist. And transgender people, there's 350 of them that were killed this year.
Exactly. Like, what are we focusing on, people?
But this is the most important thing, and we need to restructure society because of all the hate that exists because of why these people are getting killed. And then, and then I was looking through like the through some different things of like the reasoning behind saying all this, and it's like in some countries they're denied their basic human rights because they're trans. It's like, is that happening in the U.S.?
No.
And even if you could say, you can make some argument because they make an argument like, well, if I'm a trans woman, which means I'm a physical man who became a woman, but I want to use the women's restroom because otherwise I don't feel like I'm myself and so forth, right? And I feel all this stuff. That's denying me a right because I can't go to the restroom that I need to go to, right? And it's like, but no one actually has any human rights. Do you know what I mean? It's like, as a human being myself, I can go to whichever restroom I want. I'm lucky because I'm a man and I believe I'm a man and identify as a man, so I can go to the men's restroom. So therefore I have all my human rights. And it's like, I still have to focus on surviving.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like, why are we pretending? And so this is the whole game, is to get everyone to focus on a bunch of shit that, yes, every person should have all of their human rights, whether they're trans or whether they're gay, or it doesn't matter. They should have all their human rights. But it's like, I always hear this argument too around racism, where it's like, when if you were to say like, oh, okay, Black people are victims of racism all the time, like, you know, like you're going to be pulled over by the police. You as a white person, you have no idea. You've never had to worry about a police interaction. And it's like, and then you could give examples where you had, and it's like, well, look, the reality is like, well, I grew up on a trailer park. Okay, well, but you've never had to know what it feels like to not have an opportunity because of the color of your skin. And it's like, okay, yeah, that's a pretty unique, specific way of not having your basic needs met. You don't have the basic needs met because of the color of your skin, but I don't have other basic needs met just because I'm a human being that wasn't born into the elite global fucking billionaire class. So why is it that the color of your skin is a special kind of, you see what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
Like, if you grow up as a poor child, period, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, but so why is it that we need to focus on, let's solve racism? Because it's not solvable. Think about it. Just look at it from the only way, if you don't change the actual nature of the system like we're talking about, the only way to solve racism, the only way to solve this targeted violence against transgender people and these types of things and homophobia, what's the only way to solve that problem?
Just control everybody.
It's just control everybody. It's the only way.
Now you see, it's like, it's obvious that if you try to manipulate equality of outcome within the context of like getting people to work for specific organizations or groups based off X, sexuality or gender or race, it's like, that's ridiculous. Like, you should provide equal opportunity and then education, right? But it's like, from that same perspective, the people who argue for equality of outcome are the same people who are not focused on the outcome of the problems that they're fighting against. Because you said it really well, Cameron. It's like, can't you see that the outcome for everybody is like stress? Your survival isn't guaranteed. Competition, victimhood. Like, everyone
you
is
don't know what it's like to be targeted because of the color of your skin.
right.
It's like, yeah, but I know what it's like to live in constant fear and dread of waking up in the morning,
Yeah,
not
exactly.
knowing where I'm going to get money that month. So what does it fucking matter if I haven't had that specific form of oppression? It's like, I was talking to somebody on Twitter and it's like, they said something about, you don't know what it's like. And I'm like, no one is secure in a world where everybody has to compete to survive. Everyone is, sorry, no, I said everyone is oppressed in a world where we have to compete to survive.
Like, can't Bill Gates argue, like, you guys don't understand. You don't know what it's like to have all this wealth and then have a bunch of poor people coming after you and wanting to take stuff from you and wanting to come into your compound and come into your house just to see what you have.
But check
And
this
they
out.
just want to witness it.
Isn't everyone, or a large majority of people, arguing that we need to all change our lifestyles to protect the few, to protect the weakest? Who is the weakest, actually?
Billionaires.
Like, think about this. Who's weaker, Bill Gates or a plumber?
Bill Gates.
What happens if there's no money?
Mhm.
The plumber at least can go like help people with their plumbing and like they give them some food for the night or something. It's an extreme example.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is the most leveraged, the most like the ones that depend on the most people. You see what I'm saying? They're the minority. So we're arguing that we need to protect everybody. Like, we wear the mask because we care about others. We care about the weakest of our society. But in reality, it's like what we're doing is we're saying everybody needs to go along with the Great Reset, because otherwise the minority elite who only basically have their lives because they control everything, they have to maintain control. Otherwise they're fucked. I mean, the reality is if they're fucked, everyone's fucked, isn't it?
Yeah.
But the only way to solve it is education. Like, you talked about equality of outcome, right? Because then people will say, well, but we shouldn't focus on equality of outcome. We should focus on equality of opportunity.
Mm.
The problem with equality of outcome thinking is that you're only focused on the outcome when it's an outcome. What about what makes the outcome? Because they're thinking, well, we just got to make sure like every company has X number of Black people, women, whatever. So you're just trying to change the outcome. Like at the outcome level. These, like if I was going to play chess with you and I kept losing and I'm like, well, this time I want to win. So you need to have less pieces, or I get the extra moves or some shit like that. Or I could change at another level. I could go learn how to fucking play chess.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? Like you could go change something to get a different outcome. So when people say like, well, equality of outcome is stupid, I'm like, no, I agree with equality of outcome. It just depends on what you mean by the outcome. Like if the outcome is every single person must be transgender, like that's stupid. Just the same stupid thing as saying everybody must be white. Like that's a stupid, why are we trying to argue for that specific arbitrary outcome?
It's the same point that you were making on a different call about when you are trying to correct something in the moment, the consequence is already there. You have to deal with the consequence already versus the preventative measure, like specifically talking about with children, right? In parenting, like when you are in the moment, like, oh shit, the kid's doing this. And then you feel like you have to control that behavior. It's already going on, right? Better to be preventative and educate your child beforehand and set it up so that that doesn't happen and they have the understanding. And then when it does happen, also better to walk your process before you get to that point so that when it does happen, you're not reacting, you're able to be stable and go, oh, okay, well, now I need to really explain things, and you're not imposing something on your kid from a reactive state.
Yeah. How do we solve all of these problems? Is nobody has to have any unnecessary stress and feel like they have to compete with everybody. You see what I mean? But they also aren't just accepting less, because that's the world of the Great Reset. Is like everybody just accepts a lot less. The only reason people are okay with saying we don't need to own property is why? So they can never see a way they could have had it in the first place.
Right, of course.
Because if you gave everybody the choice, you're like, look, either everybody can have no property or everybody can have property. What would everybody choose?
Yeah, has property.
Why aren't the elite saying that is the solution? Isn't that what they want for themselves?
Mhm.
They don't not. It's like I always laugh when you see like the Pope say anything, because this Pope is so like communist or socialist or whatever, and it's always like saying shit where you're like, dude, you live in a fucking palace, you have armed security, like it's a joke. Like anything this guy says, I'm like, just go live like everybody else and keep preaching.
This Pope started out with saying like, oh yeah, every religion goes to heaven. It's like, what's the point of your religion then?
Right, like it's literally just to like get everybody totally not wanting to be religious anymore. And I'm okay with that, but it's like the religion needs to be, you actually care what's best, not just don't believe in anything. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, meaning people just think, oh, I don't have any religion, therefore what is the religion? Just try to feel good all the time.
Yeah, your feelings.
So it's not like it's still a fucking same thing. That's why people join religion in the first place, because they felt bad and they want something to make them not feel bad. It's the same starting point, right? But this whole, if we want to change the outcome, you have to change what's producing the outcome, which is the input. And the current input right now is everyone's teaching their kids to be little consumer pieces of shit that only try to seek energy. That's the bottom line. And they're not teaching them, they're not giving them the vocabulary to understand what's the value that everyone has. So how can you then have a situation where you have an outcome where everybody is taken care of if no one's actually valuing each other. And that's not going to happen by just controlling society. It's only going to happen by each person educating themselves and educating their children and then supporting other people. It's the only way. Right. And that's why it's so important. Like, people feel like, oh, it's inevitable, the Great Reset, all this stuff happening. It's just what, you can't do anything about it. It's like, it's not going to work. We have to do something. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, oh, it's inevitable, let's just go along with it. It's like, it's not going to work. It's only going to make things worse. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So people are only going to get more fed up. So the idea they need to feel like, oh, there's nothing you can do about it, it's not going to work. It can't work by design. I'm telling you right now, 10 years from now, people are going to watch this and be like, wow, he was so right. Of course, by then we'll be in a position where we can change something. You see what I mean? But for those who are not yet on board, it's like, you'll see people will become more crazy. Things will get worse. People will become more despondent. There'll be more division. That's the only thing that's going to happen from this.
And at the end of the day, imagine if Bill Gates actually had good intentions and he was a utilitarianist. It's like the ends justify the means. The way he's going about it is a little fucked up, but he's actually just like, shit, all these people are crazy. They're going to tear everything up and just everything's going to fall apart. His way of doing things is, okay, we just get the population down to a place where we can control them and then control them to so that they don't fuck everything up. Bill Gates is counting on us, man. The whole Great Reset, all that stuff. Eventually there's going to come a point where, like Karen talked about, Bernard talks about, right? Where no one's going to leave their house anymore. Basically, right? Where everyone's going to be cooped up. But yeah, we're already here. We're already here. So it's already this point. And
Dude, hold on, real quick. In Canada, if you go into any area where they feel like you may have been around someone who had COVID, you have to go and stay home for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's already a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's other countries that do the same thing.
Mm.
So imagine when it becomes anything else that they want to add to the list.
Mhm.
Because you would think like, oh, I mean, it's not going to go that far. Give me a break. But it's like they're already saying now in the governments, they're like, well, you can be trans and you can choose your own gender. So they're willing to say anything and do anything if it's politically expedient.
Mhm.
So it's not even a maybe someday this will happen. It's happening right now.
Which helps me clarify what I mean is once everyone's clear that this is not a temporary thing, right? Because people still think, oh yeah, at the end of this month, like
Holy
It's gonna
shit.
go back to normal.
You still
Right.
thinking that? Fuck. Remember back when it was like April and they were like, we just need 15 days, okay? Just 15 days.
And isn't Biden saying just 100 days where
Yeah,
everybody
100 days wear the
Just
mask.
100 days.
like why would that even
Somebody
make any
said
sense?
if we're going by 15 days to slow the spread logic, that's like 1,000 years. Like,
Right? So it's like why would you it's just like just 100 days for everybody to wear a mask, then we're done. It's like that's what somebody tries to get me to do when they want me to do a bunch more. Like just start cleaning the room, and then once you're like, okay, I'll do the corner of the room. They're like, hey, while you're at it, right? Hey, while you're at it, can you just like pick up that stuff in the corner and all like that? And you left that stuff out. Can you just? And it becomes like it's your
I
whole.
mean, since you're already up,
Yeah, exactly. Hey, can you grab me some water if you want? Oh, while you're at it, can you actually make the coffee and do that? The point is, when we all realize that this is here to stay, right? All of us. It's like we would have settled into the consequence of the average person is like, yeah, it's not a good idea to go outside, right? And all people are going to be exposed to is experiencing the world through, like you said on the call before this, through apps and social media and all that stuff and media. The people that are going to be rewarded the most are the ones that are willing to go out. And this is why it's so important to sharpen our communication, to become really effective in selling a vision of this world doesn't have to be this. It doesn't have to go that way. It doesn't have to be like that. But if you're not doing this for yourself, you'll never get it. You'll never get it. So Bill Gates, Klaus Schwab, or Schwaus Klaus, whatever. No, I'm just kidding. But all these guys, imagine they're just like, oh shit, if we don't do something, everyone's going to be fucked. Everyone's going to be fucked. This planet's going to end. Like, imagine that. Like, shit, oh my God, we actually have good intentions, kind of. I'm doing air quotes here. It's like they would love for everyone to be educated in a way. Just imagine, okay, let's pretend that they would actually appreciate everybody not being retarded, that we can't just consume, and then everything's going to be okay. We can't just keep growing at an exponential rate and then everything's going to be fine. All right. So they don't know it, right? And because we predict the future, we create the future. This is what everyone's waiting for. Everyone's waiting for a group of fucking real fucking people who don't think they're part of the resistance, even though every fucking media outlet and every corporation has the same radical beliefs as you. Yeah, I think what I think is radical. Yeah, like we should abolish the police. Everyone's saying that. It's not special. Everyone's waiting on a group of people to actually take responsibility for this. And nobody knows how. Everybody at the highest levels, all this stuff. It's like, oh, they're saying the problem. It's so clear. It's so evident what the problem is. People are controlling all this stuff. What do? It's like the story just kind of, it's like we have to stand up and be just like a movie, but that's not the answer. So those of us, those of you who are listening to this, who are willing to stand up, go out and make a difference, isn't it so obvious that you're going to be the one to receive the reward for that? You're going to be the one that's going to be able to take responsibility for the biggest problems in this world. But that's only available for people who aren't just focused on their happiness, who realize that it's like, shouldn't it be about fulfillment? And what fulfillment is the satisfaction or happiness that comes from doing what is best. Where that isn't the focal point, but it will be a byproduct of that, right? What fulfillment is it comes from the satisfaction from what you're able to do. So wouldn't it just make sense to take on the biggest problem that you can see in the world right now? And because everyone's going to be at such a low level, all you have to do is stick your head out and you'll be the brave one. You'll be the one that's going to, you're going to be the one, the transitional leader to get people to wake up. That's why it's cool that the new term that you guys coined was like, rather than having the Great Reset, why not have the Great Awakening? But it's not going to happen unless literally you, I'm not talking about figurative, unless we all stand, I mean, literally you as an individual listening to this, actually make the decision within yourself of, fuck, I have to be doing this myself. We should be united in the same purpose, right? And especially if you're using the tools for yourself, you're going to change. The next step for you is support other people to change. Because what does that say about you? If you have the cure for all that bullshit that's going on inside of you, and you're not willing to share it with other people, what does that say about you?
You're a selfish asshole.
Right.
Or you
And
just don't know what to do. And that's what, and that's why we have selfperfected.com.
If you just listen to this whole thing and you don't know what to do, you're a dumbass.
But you can't do it alone, so you have to do it as a group, right?
Mhm.
So we're
And
not
this is-
saying just go out there and stand up and start talking to people. Like,
Right.
come talk to us. Come join the group. That's the point.
And this is something that I had to realize on my own. This is something that Mitchell had to realize on his own. Drake had to realize on his own, and something that Cameron realized a long time ago, but he's supported us to have much, much better lives. So that's what we're here to do for you as well, to support you to see that for yourself.
This
Because-
is going to be, look, this is the only place that there's going to be any purpose whatsoever left.
Mhm.
Like, I'm telling you, like, this is the only place left where there will be any purpose. Think about it. Even if you wanted to be an entrepreneur, are you going to be able to do it online?
Nope.
Cyber attack.
Because the cyber pandemic is going to make sure that only a few people have control over everything because they can't allow people just to do their own thing online. Can you go start your own restaurant?
Nope.
Can you just go buy a shopping mall? Can you go start a Best Buy or some bullshit? Like there will literally be nothing that you can do to make money as an entrepreneur. I don't think they're going to prevent you, like in law, like you're not allowed to be an entrepreneur. There's just not going to be anything to be an entrepreneur about. So you're going to have to create your own opportunity, which is, hey, what does everybody need? They need to understand how they work. They need real education. Everybody needs to evolve. If we don't evolve, the system's never going to change. The system's a reflection of us. So the only way left to be a real entrepreneur in this world, in fact, it's the people who are already in control. Think about it. They're all tech entrepreneurs, aren't they? And that's what we're doing. We're saying we have the technology to know how you actually work and how to change your programming so that you don't get reset. Because a computer that can't change, what do? You just wipe it and you start it all over again. It's the same fucking thing as it was before. It's the same pursuit of happiness. It's the same bullshit. It's the same anxiety. It's just when you wake up, suddenly there's more security in place and you just can't do anything anymore. The way out is by doing what we're doing, because it's going to be the only, logically, it's the only purpose you can have is to support others to stand up.
So
Mitchell.
self-perfected, baby.
Yeah.
Yep.
Closing remarks.
Self-perfected.com.
Yeah. Remember the dash. We've had some people asking about self-perfected. Self-perfected.com. Join the group. Apply to the group if you're not in it. And then when you're in the group, reach out and connect with us, and we'll show you the way so you can show others the way.
Talk about the store because it's open now.
Yeah, we got the store.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those of you who are, it's brand new to start with. Just got released. And what's in there? What's in there, folks?
Well, it's the main products we have: shirts, sweatshirts, hats, stickers, things like that really show you what you stand for. So every time I look in the mirror, I wear these shirts all the time, right? I got a sticker on my laptop. I got a blanket, all that, because it's constant reminder of what really matters, because we're in a world where we're bombarded with all this stuff that we've just spent the past couple hours talking about. You need to keep reminding yourself of what really matters, which is self-perfection, right? So check out the store. We can include a link to it in the YouTube links and stuff like that. We're refining the URL, but yeah, you'll find it in the Facebook group too.
So just remember, for somebody who puts on a Black Lives Matter shirt, what are they showing about themselves?
That's what they support. Also that they're a dumbass.
When somebody puts on a self-perfected shirt, it represents something. Remember that. Other than that,
That's all for this week.
see you later, everybody.
Share this with people too.